All right, and away we go.
We're back. We're back and we're in the zone.
Oh,
I have an odd question, but I don't really know how to pose it because there's a word that I can't really figure out, like what would be best to use. But involving aliens
okay.
and the universe, do you think it's more? I want to say egotistical would probably be the right word. But which one do you think would be more egotistical, to believe that we are the only intelligent life in the universe,
Yes.
or to believe, hold up,
Okay.
or to believe that we are the most advanced in the universe? So, like, as far as whenever we talk about like aliens coming and visiting
Though
us,
I still agree with the first one.
really?
Yeah. I'll hold on. I'll sell it to you.
I feel like thinking that you're the most advanced in the universe is almost more of like a self flex than
Well,
thinking you're the only one.
okay. Here's what I'll say. It's more egotistical to think that we're the only life, because that, I think, comes into more of a, that's not like a science thought. That's more of like a religious type tie to it. And so I think there's more ego to that, to think that if there was a god or some type of like great creationist or something like that, that we would be the only, out of everything that we can actually see, as far as all the other planets that we have physical evidence that exist because we can see stars and all that shit,
Yeah.
that to believe that we would be somehow that special, to literally be, not only that we are life on this planet, just solely on this planet, but to believe somehow that out of all the species that have come and are existing, that we were the ones that just somehow found our way to like the top. Versus just, so I think that thinking we're more, yeah, it's more egotistical to think that we're the only ones, because that has an air of just like, we're the ones. I think when you think of the advancement side of it and everything, I still think that that's egotistical, but then you've already accepted the fact that there's life on other planets. So you've already made that jump. So you're not being so egotistical to think that you could be the only one.
It's
And
less self centered to think that there
Yeah.
are other intelligent life forms on other planets. They're just not as advanced.
Yeah, like when you think, if you were to think, let's put yourself in the mindset of you thinking that we're the most advanced. Where do you see like second, third, fourth place? What era compared to our eras on Earth do you see them at right now? Do you view and see them like, I bet they're still like in their Aztec phase, or they're still in their like Egyptian phase, like, or like, how do you see that? Or do you see them being like, oh, they're probably not even like out of like the evolutionary animal stage?
It depends, because on Earth it seems, and maybe I guess on other planets it would be, but culturally I feel like they were more advanced than we are now. I feel like we've
You think that
de-evolved.
our previous like civilizations have been culturally more advanced than
Oh
us?
yeah,
Okay.
way more, way more. I think that there was like more of a freedom of arts because they actually were creating things.
So overall, or just like the certain civilizations were more culturally advanced? I wouldn't say
think
more overall, but I would say that yes, like out of like, if you were to name like the like five big civilizations, you could easily name five that were probably more culturally advanced than we are.
I feel like they pushed it further than us because they kind of had to. Like, out of necessity, they had to create cultures.
Yeah.
Whereas now we're starting like 3/4 of the way through the race. But if we were paired up against them, they would be able to blow by us because they were creating cultures and different things as they were going, and eventually they were wiped
We've
out.
just co-opted.
Yeah,
We just
exactly.
fucking co-opt
Yep.
all these different aspects of like, of different cultures, and then we call it like, well, it's American culture. Well, what is it? It's just a lot of everybody else's. They've chosen like top hits of everybody else's.
We got to pick and choose. Unfortunately, all of our choices weren't great.
No.
And aren't great, but I do think that
We picked a lot of the ones that like nobody else wanted and had gotten rid of very quickly after we adopted it. They were like, "Oh, you guys are still fucking doing that? Like, we're still doing like heavy slavery over here," and everyone else is just kind of like, "Ooh, we've moved past that."
in some of those places, I think we're probably pretty heavy slavery until the end.
Oh yeah,
But there's still just other cultural stuff. Like when we were talking about like the Incan tribes and shit like that, that to me felt like if you were not necessarily on the bottom rung of society, but if you were just like an everyday about towner, like kind of middle class, it'd be pretty sweet. Like,
Yeah.
just to live kind of in that pocket of still getting like the riches from going out and conquering other lands and seeing
Yeah.
advancements that way, but like not having to do that or make those decisions.
Well, and like their poor people were not like our like people like in poverty today. They wouldn't allow their civilization to like get to that point, whether it be like they'd like no, you can't stay in the village anymore, like you need to go make it on your own, or they would just take care of those people. They probably valued people more as well.
Well, and it's because there were less of them.
That's the thing too. Like people don't. I was gonna say how we're gonna get far away from this, but you're gonna be able to tie it back in, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Do you think that that's, we have a lot of people still pushing and be like, yeah, we can fit more people. We can fit more people. We've always been able to have more people. Look how much open space we have. There's all this uninhabited land and everything. But then at the same time, we're at a point now where we have just like so many people that we have just spares that like you don't have to give a shit about, like certain segments of society that it's okay not to really give a shit about because there are so many people. There's someone, if something happens to them, there's people that take their place or something like that.
Yeah, it's. I wouldn't say that it's a good thing that it is that way, but there is sort of like if, God forbid, a nurse dies.
Yeah.
We have other people to step up in that situation that are going through college that can step in and be that nurse.
Yeah.
If you had a tribe of 2,000 people and there were like 3 medicine men and one of the nurses for the medicine man died, that was a far bigger blow to that. Not
That's like
only
a lifetime
economy,
of
but
preparation and
Yeah.
training that you've just lost. Not to say that like our nurses don't like train a long time, but
well, no, they don't. But we're also like setting up the next
yeah.
set of them to be thrown in the way. It's like you go through college and nursing school and everything to be able to step into that position at a moment's notice.
Well, and that used to be a thing that, like, if you were the ruler of a kingdom or a city, part of like the pride and like gravitas of your kingdom and everything would be that there was no poverty, that everyone was in good condition and everyone was healthy. I think that had to have been a thing at some point, right?
Yeah, everybody was working for one common goal.
Yeah.
And now we see them as if you're not working for the same common goal that we don't have to worry about you, which is unfortunate and it is sad, but I do kind of think that that's how it is. But smaller populations seem like there is more of a sense of community, but it's more of a sense of community because you have to like weigh on each other. Like you have to use each other. We have neighbors now where you can have a lawyer and it's like, cool, man. I'm super happy that you're a lawyer. You're an awesome guy. My life and your life only intersect at the point that we live next to each other. But back in the day, if you did run afoul of the government, there was probably like 3 lawyers that lived in the community that you had to go to.
Yeah.
Now we have a yellow pages that's full of them.
Yeah.
So it's good that people have gone out there, and I think our population needs that many because it seems like they are overworked. But if we would just had a smaller civilization, I feel like not only would it be easier to have that sense of community, but if anything were to go wrong and we had to go into hiding or we had to maybe
I see
pull
where you're
back
going with this. This was clever.
Yeah, you like that? I think that with smaller populations, we would be able to maybe like sink into the forest and hide for our own protection against people that would be looking to either study us or kill us or try to rid us of their area. And I think that would be something that would be good for humanity or ape-manity.
Do you think there could be, are you think of anyone specific when
Yeah.
you're talking about perhaps offshoots of civilization or
Maybe offshoots of humans.
yes, that are maybe currently among us today?
Could be. If you're out in the woods, maybe you're among them, but you don't know.
That and you're listening to this.
Yep.
Oh, what do we call these people?
Sasquatch, Yeti, Indiku in ancient text I almost said text messages. In ancient texts.
Bigfoot.
Is it? We got to establish this first because this is the most important thing to me
Okay.
of this whole thing. A plurality of Bigfoot, big feet, Bigfoots, Bigfoot, just like you would call deer, deer.
Ooh. Um,
A plurality of
I
Bigfoots.
know. I'm thinking about this.
Big feet
I,
sounds
I
like
think you
past
just
tense.
have to say a group of Bigfoot
Yeah,
because you can't even with Sasquatches doesn't sound right. Like I saw a group of Sasquatch, like
I
a,
didn't even think about applying it to Sasquatch, but
but
yeah,
like a herd of like I think it's deer. Like I saw some Sasquatch, I saw some Bigfoot. Like I think it's got to be that.
gotta be. Plurality is the same as the singularity.
Well, even more so the origin of the name Bigfoot because I'm just going to go between Bigfoot Sasquatch when we're talking about this. The name was actually coined in 1958 in Humboldt County, California.
Bigfoot was.
Yes, yeah, the term Bigfoot by some loggers. So that's where what do they call it no, it's not the entomology because that's what the name is like composed of. That's where the nickname came up with.
Yeah, even before that, Sasquatch is an anglicized word from Saskets, which meant hairy man or wild man. Mm-hmm. And that was the word that the native populations, the First Nation of kind of where like Canada is today, the Pacific Northwest, Vancouver, British Columbia, they were called Saskets.
P&W represent. Woo woo.
And they went for Sasquatch instead, which was probably easier to say because I don't even know if I'm saying Saskets right.
Sasket sounds French. Saskets.
Yeah, it's to me anything that has lived this long in like the zeitgeist of the world, because we see ancient Native American writings about the wild man and the hairy man out in the woods. What I was talking about earlier with Enkidu. Enkidu is a character in the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest texts that we have dating back to like the Sumerians or whatever. And Gilgamesh's boy that he hangs out with is a hairy wild man who is the king of another, basically like olden day Sasquatches almost.
Okay.
So it shows up in text from there. It shows up in text from tribes that are up in the Pacific Northwest, which we would probably have to believe came over through the Bering Strait.
Okay. So this is kind of where I wanted to start out with this because I feel like a lot of this stuff, more of like the documented stuff, of course, that all happens like in more recent history and everything. Mm-hmm. So if there are going to be, and we're going to entertain the notion that there are or have been a group of what do they call them, cryptids, humanoid type, like hybrid, like ape hybrid type, just something between on the evolutionary. I think that's the best way to say it. Like in evolution, if you believe in that, then you had was it Neanderthal, then Cro-Magnon man, right? And that's where the
weren't those offshoots?
That's what I'm saying. That was what they considered the next step. Was it was first the Neanderthal, then that stayed for a while, but then the offshoot of that was Cro-Magnon. And that's where the dominant. Because I'm pretty sure Cro-Magnon was after, or maybe Neander. I don't know. It's one or the other.
Yeah, the theory of kind of like the fossil record and how humans have evolved over the years has changed so much, because before we used to think of it as like a linear thing. Mm-hmm. It was just Neanderthal, Thal, however the fuck you say it. I don't really care which one. But then there's like one that we will be talking about today, Gigantopithecus, which is another offshoot of a Neanderthal. We had Homo erectus, Homo sapiens.
That's where it might be. I'm getting those. I think it might have been Neanderthal, then like Homo. Like I'm gonna figure this out.
Yeah, I don't know about Cro-Magnon. That sounds like a caveman to me. But we're starting to realize that it's not so linear as far as like that we directly evolved from the great apes. We're starting to see that there were offshoots, and it's more of like a bush-like instead of just like a straight-up tree.
Yeah.
Where there are smaller branches. So to say that there wasn't an offshoot in a Gigantopithecus or a Bigfoot-like creature seems to be kind of odd that we would deny that.
Okay, so the following stages human evolution go Dryopithecus. It's early. That's the first one. Ramapithecus, Australopithecus. That's one that also kind of comes into this as well. It's Gigantopithecus, and Australopithecus. Then after that was Homo erectus. Then after that, Homo sapiens neanderthalensis. And then Homo sapiens sapiens.
And I'm not going to sit here and act like I know really what any of
the
that
only
means.
reason that I'm saying that is because then that lets us know when we're talking about like Gigantopithecus and Australopithecus, how many rungs down the evolutionary ladder. It would have been like two separate. It would have been like separated by 2 rungs.
To say that we aren't related to, if Sasquatches are real, that we aren't related to them. We're not related directly, but like we're cousins. It's not like brothers and sisters. It's like a little bit further down the line, there's a different offshoot of humans.
But a de-evolved one.
Yes,
And some people do have de-evolved cousins.
Yeah. Unevolved is probably more than de-evolved.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, it's all over the world. And that's kind of the other thing that I feel like I don't want to say that I don't believe in Bigfoot because there's a part of me that's 8 years old that's inside of me that still really wants to believe in Bigfoot and whimsy and just the excitement of it all.
Yes.
But at the same time, it's everywhere. I mean, it's Yowie in Australia. It's on a fucking island. They have what they believe, like we believe in Sasquatch, is a Yowie.
Yeah.
In Asia, there's an almas, a urine, and a yeti, which everybody I think kind of knows yeti. But those are the Asian versions of it. And even in America,
Yeti,
we have...
I am the Yeti. Do you remember that American Pie? After he takes the shit in the bathroom, he's like, Yeti, I am the Yeti.
There was an old failed character in WCW that came in right around like 1997. And he was basically a mummy. But they called him the Yeti. But they couldn't say the word Yeti, so it was Yeti.
For copyright reasons, you can't represent the Yeti people.
It pops up so many different places to where we still don't have any documented evidence of it. But how? Well, how is this possible? How does this show up all over the world?
Well, and so many of them, they all like predate Bigfoot.
Yeah.
So it's almost a combination of how did I phrase it to you with like what I figured out my Bigfoot lane is that I think it's highly possible, but I don't think it's very probable. Like I think it's possible that animals or some type of like subspecies can exist or did exist. But do I think it's very probable that it was something along the lines of Bigfoot? Probably not. Like if someone got into my head, like, do you believe in Bigfoot? I'm like, no. But at the same time, I believe Bigfoot is possible.
Well, and we have things in recorded history that we just didn't believe were real that we ended up finding out that were real. And one of them
giant squid.
Yeah, a giant squid is a perfect
We heard there
example.
were legends of sailors running into giant squids and all this kind of stuff, but no one was like, no one's ever actually like seen one or like documented one. Giant squid wash up now.
Every once in a while, not often.
And they're not the huge ones, but they can tell that they're young ones. And so they like, well, shit, this is a young one and it's already huge. Like, what can we extrapolate out of that? So you know that certain things that are myths, even then have maybe some truth in history.
Well, and the other one that comes to mind for me is great apes, gorillas. We didn't know that there were large silverback gorillas down in kind of like I think it's called the Central Plains of Africa. But the people that lived around there that had seen them were saying these things exist.
It's like some superhuman that lives in the woods or some shit like that. Yeah. What would it look like to them?
And so we went for a long time believing that great apes weren't real until the day that we stumbled upon a great ape and we saw a large, massive silverback gorilla. Then we knew that this is something that's actually real. So I'd like to believe that we're just to the point to where we just haven't found Sasquatch yet. Excuse me. Unfortunately, technologically, we've come, I think, too far to be able to say that we haven't found him yet.
My argument in this is going to be strictly pro Bigfoot. I'm not going to even really play.
You're not going to play Bigfoot politics?
No, I'm not going to dance around the Bigfoot topic. Everything that I'm going to think and talk about today is going to be why I think that it's plausible for them to have existed or remnants or something like that.
Yeah,
I'm not going to be the Bigfoot party pooper here.
No. I'm open to all this stuff, and I just have to look at a topic like this as just something that has made me just irrationally happy for so long. Like this is Bigfoot to me was introduced as a kid, and it immediately is scary as a kid because it's like there's a 9 foot tall hairy guy that's just walking around the woods, and you fuckers want to go camping.
He can
in a
throw
tent?
trees and fucking rocks and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna go out into this guy's lane, and that's gonna happen. And then as you get older, you kind of realize, okay, this was just sort of like Santa Claus. This was something that we heard about. That is, it may not be real, but there's still such a.
He's on TV all the fucking time. He's as real as Santa Claus.
Yeah, we got Yeti fucking coolers that have a picture of him on the side. Like you see the cutouts that people have that they place up against their fences that are like Yeti shadow or
it's the silhouette. It's like the
yeah.
arms out and the head to the side, and we'll get to where that comes from too. No, but like you're saying, like as a kid growing up, there were like so many situations in which, and this is one of my questions for later, but I guess we can kind of just like we're gonna like mix it in, but it was almost like Bigfoot was so like recognized and just like people were just accepting like, hey, yeah, that's Bigfoot on TV. Not like in a historical way, like that's a Bigfoot, but like so many characters that were based on Bigfoot.
Yeah.
That like within our culture, it was just like, well, that's a Bigfoot. Like almost like it was a previous animal that everyone was just super familiar with. Like we were talking about Harry and the Hendersons.
My all-time favorite Bigfoot movie. I love John Lithgow, so he's probably one of my top 10s just because
the part where he tries to white fang the Bigfoot and is like, get out of here, and then he fucking punches and cold cocks Harry across the face, and you're just waiting to see like what's gonna happen. Like
he's gonna rip his arms off.
No shit. Thank God they made the men's, and then he gets to see him off into the woods, and he gives him the hug, and then you find out that the Bigfoot family has just been standing there the whole time.
Yep, and that's we're gonna talk about this guy because I fuck with this guy big time. But the guy that they run into, the one that runs the Bigfoot museum that they talk to, that ends up seeing him off in the end and hugs him and they cry and all that stuff.
LaFleur?
Yeah, LaFleur was the guy that was trying to hunt him and kill him.
That's right. That's
the
right.
bad guy. But there's this guy named Grover Krantz. Did you learn much about Grover?
Yes.
Grover was kind of the loosely based character that they put around the Bigfoot hunter that was out there that just wanted to see one. The one that sees him off and cries at the end and all that kind of stuff that had been looking for him for so many years.
Oh, and then at the end, he's like, there's always Loch Ness.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, gotcha.
Yeah. But Grover, he plays into this so big, and I love this guy. This guy, I wish he was still around. But just an awesome guy that we'll get into.
The guy that took over for him kind of is like the Bigfoot guy. It's a professor at Idaho State University.
Yep. Yeah, his name, Jeff Meldrum.
That's right.
We'll talk about Jeff, too, because he comes up, too.
But even growing up, like a Goofy movie. Remember the scene when they're out camping and then all of a sudden he casts the meat? Goofy's doing his casting and he ends up snagging Pete's steak.
I haven't seen a Goofy movie since I was like 10.
Okay. But anyway, Sasquatch is in that.
Yeah.
Okay, just as, anyone that grew up with Star Wars, like, look at fucking Chewbacca. You're going to tell me that, like...
Similar.
I realize that, like, George Lucas says he got the idea for, like, the co-pilot based on his dog. But then when you're turning that in, you're like, I'm just going to turn my version of a Malamute into a fucking... And then you get basically... Wookiees are Bigfoot.
Yeah. And
kind of in our minds, if you look at a Wookiee and a Bigfoot next to each other, there's some differences. But, I mean, you could put a Wookiee in the woods and they'd be like, that's a fucking Bigfoot. I think as, like, growing up as kids and everything... Bigfoot has been so like ingrained in our culture that just in a cursory way, like if you're not going to give it any thought whatsoever and you're like, did Bigfoot exist? Be like, well, I know I've seen a lot of Bigfoot like in my life, like on TV and all that kind of stuff, but are they fake? Like, it's just, is it the most widely accepted like creature from myth that we just casually put in stuff? We don't do that with Loch Ness Monster. We don't do that with like the Chupacabra, but there's Bigfoot fucking so many offshoots.
Yeah. Okay. I see what you were saying there when you said offshoots at the end. Like Loch Ness is sort of big in and of itself. Like it can be its own category. You have it is Scotland. But when you come to America, as far as Bigfoot goes, you have like I think they're called grass apes up in like Ohio. You have Sasquatch in the Northwest. You have skunk ape that's down in Florida.
Yeah.
Like there's the same thing that we just call different names regionally in this country.
But I think it's messing with Sasquatch. It's Bigfoot is how we know it. Even like in those areas, Harry and the Hendersons was like a big movie.
Yeah, very true.
So it's like everyone knows it more as Bigfoot or Sasquatch than those other like local legends because most of the sightings were in the Pacific Northwest. Like a third of all of the sightings, and the rest were equally scattered kind of throughout the United States.
Yeah, we got some fun facts about that.
Yeah, but I mean, even like, so video games, in a ton of video games, I think like maybe the Uncharted series or something like that, it might have been even Tomb Raider. When you go to like the, like Yemen and what's that mountain range? Not the Alps.
It's
Everest. What's that all part of?
Himalayas.
The Himalayas. Where the Yeti kind of legend is, anytime you go to levels there, you're going to fucking run into a Yeti. The Matterhorn in Disneyland. You ride through there and there's a fucking Yeti there. There's a ride at Disney World called Expedition to Everest, where it's like Legend of the Himalayas, and you fucking run into the abominable snowman.
Really?
Again, is the Yeti. So there's just so much, like, what other creature has this, like...
Cachet.
Yeah, like almost this widely acceptance, like this is fake, but it's so big it's fake. Like...
And maybe it's not. And that's what I want to believe, is maybe it's not fake. Maybe the commercialization that we've put on Sasquatch, the first one that comes out needs to immediately ask for reparations. He needs as much money as we can give that guy.
The reason the Sasquatch community gets kind of laughed at, or people don't take it seriously, they don't have good PR, man. Anybody who's their spokesperson is somebody that you're not going to take really advice on anything. You don't trust them. It's like that dude off Ancient Aliens. The one with the fucking crazy hair and everything like that.
The meme, yeah.
Yes. If I'm getting alien information, I don't want to see him giving me the alien information because his look makes me not believe him.
You have to remember, though, that there has to be a normal-looking person that agrees to do it.
Okay, but I know. But the professor at ISU...
Meldrum, yeah.
Yes, he looks pretty... normal.
But also, he's a professor of anthropology that's gone into Bigfoot, not a Bigfoot researcher that's gone into
that has no
anthropology.
formal big. Like, yeah. I love when they address it during like the Bigfoot documentaries and shows. They just say he's the top guy in his field. Mm-hmm. Like, he can't make any of like.
We're not going to tell you what the field is,
exactly,
because you're gonna laugh about it. But yeah,
and we're not going to sit here and bore you with his credentials because there aren't a lot,
and there aren't traditional credentials that are going to come out of this guy.
Okay, so jumping back, like I said, I'm going to argue this from a logical perspective about why I think that this could be possible. Even so, I'm going to say Yeti in where the like earliest or one of the earliest kind of legends about like these hominids or Yeti or like basically these giant hairy ape creatures,
giant hairy motherfuckers.
Yeah. So, with them kind of starting out in like Yemen and that Asian area, like that continent, there's accepted belief that people that came and settled initially, like within Canada and essentially North America, came over the Bering Land Strait, what used to connect Russia to Alaska. So if people can make it over there, then there's reason to believe that animals that could also migrate and make that journey could also do that as well. I think that's where you also get, once the continent's separated or that melt. I don't know if it was like a actual land bridge or if it was just a frozen section that never really thawed.
Yeah, or maybe even like just a shallower area.
Just some way to get through where you're not having to use a boat or swim or anything.
Yeah, technically a bridge doesn't have to be above water. It can just be a shallower part that you can get across. It wasn't covered.
Can you imagine if you're talking about like, it looks like a 15
like
feet wide stream that it actually just separates Russia from North America at that point?
Yeah, I think they got polar bears in Siberia, so
just build a bridge. They actually could build a bridge, a wooden bridge across it, and that was actually the bridge.
Drawbridge.
Okay, so you can end up getting creatures or animals that come across there. I think there even were some, because I think have found mammoth on all continents and everything. It makes sense that there could be the same types of species, but if they were separated for long enough, maybe they could like offshoot just a little bit from an evolutionary standpoint. Okay, so logically thinking, that is saying that if there was some type of Yeti or anything like that yes, it could get over to North America, but it could also be in Asia and those areas as well.
So how does he get to Australia, though?
I'm not here to argue about the Australia version of this. The focus
Yowie's got to get a little bit of...
we'll give some love to Yowie, but my argument is essentially for the North American Bigfoot or Sasquatch.
Yeah, I don't see really anything there that would lead me to believe that it wouldn't be possible. Because like you say with polar bears, we find them in North America, we find them in Australia. There was a land bridge there. That all makes sense.
North
The
America and Australia.
Huh?
You said we found polar bears in
Oh,
North
not
America.
Australia, America and Russia.
Okay,
Sorry.
yes.
So we're right there. We have certain different First Nations, Native American people that came from over there as well. So the migration patterns are definitely possible for not only humans but also animals too. The ones that I start to have trouble with are like in America, the Pacific Northwest, Western Canada. That all makes sense to me. But how in the world do we have sightings in 49 of the 50 states in this country? How do they spread out like that?
Okay, well, at the same time, this is so early on that there aren't a lot of people. It's only the people migrating around. So as they spread out, it's just, it's a law of percentages. Like how many people versus how many, Yeti or whatever, we're going to call them Sasquatch at this point, that have come over to the North American continent. It could be that, they just were traveling, or if they were nomadic or something like that, that maybe they were traveling. A lot of them stayed, within the Pacific Northwest. So there's been over in as far as sightings. And of course, this isn't going to go back to when they were first migrating because that's not fucking documented.
I'm assuming this is when we got phones or like a way to communicate.
Wait, yeah. So or like people coming in from out of the woods,
Yeah.
like to a trading post and that stuff. Over 10,000 reported sightings in the continental United States. So a third of those are in the Pacific Northwest. And then the rest are kind of scattered interspersely through different parts of the country.
Yeah, the only state that we haven't gotten a Sasquatch sighting from is Hawaii. So clearly that goes to show that
That makes
Bigfoot's
sense.
just a shit swimmer.
Boat building, not great. So yeah, I mean, if they migrated and everything like that, then it's possible that that's why different places have different reports or different sightings. And again, one group separates off from another group, and you know, they change their. I don't know if you would really like. I'm not saying like change your appearance or anything like that, but as far as what I mean is like I'm trying to think of like an evolutionary time where it's possible that like they could have grown smaller if they were out in a smaller group and everything, and that's why maybe the physical comparison between like different versions of Bigfoot. Does this make sense what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah,
does
the reason that I enjoy this so much is I'm hearing you try to make cogent points about something that we just don't know is real or not. Like,
but I feel I can make cogent points about
Yeah.
this for just like, you don't even have to suspend belief. Humans came over, they migrated around, they made different cultures. That's why you had different Native American tribes. What I'm trying to say is that if you had between, like, you're talking about the United States, you had like the skunk ape. What was it called in the South?
I don't.
Okay, what was it called? Sorry, Ohio. I mean, sorry.
Oh, I think it's called like the grass monster,
Okay.
or grass, something grass.
So, and it all depends on who's calling it these things or identifying what it looks like. You could have had a smaller one. You could have had one that just had down for the skunk ape that maybe had different colors, some gray on it. And so that's what I'm saying as far as like you had different looking ones, which is why you maybe get like different descriptions of them.
Yeah, and people will adapt to their surroundings. So I don't know why it can't be applied to Bigfoot. It just there's certain things like one of the main defining features of a skunk ape is more of like the reddish fur on them as opposed to I think more like a brownish up top.
Maybe they're within the Bigfoot community. Maybe ginger Bigfoot were persecuted,
And that's why they got sent
much
to
like
Florida?
today. And so they were like, "Hey, once we get, you can fucking roll with us across this Bering Land Bridge, but as soon as we get to the New World,
You're headed down to America's butthole.
Yep, you're gonna keep going, keep going until you hit water, and then you can stay there." And they got to Florida. Okay, so that's just from my logical standpoint, saying that that's how they could have possibly been sightings in different parts, or you just get the reported sightings in the way that these legends are created. Not saying that they are around nowadays or anything, but if they were within early like Native Americans spanning across the country, we take legends and we interswap. We just talked about how we take a whole bunch of different cultural stuff and try to make it our own.
Yeah, I it's just so funny to me based on other Native American as far as like spoken handed down oral traditions because you do see legitimate animals that we do have now. Like the coyote is sneaky and swift and different things. There's different like sort of magical qualities
Yeah.
that they put towards an eagle, a condor, anything like that. And Bigfoot is kind of the same way. Wild man, hairy man, both their eyes glow. They're able to move, and there's
Super
a section
strong,
of
like feats of strength. And
Yeah.
they towered above normal men.
there's a section of Bigfoot culture that I don't want to get into, and that's the people that think that they were dropped off on spaceships. For as crazy as Bigfoot
That
is,
hurts the
that's
Bigfoot movement.
it's a bridge too far. Like, let's try to either knock down that Bigfoot's real or aliens are real before we start combining the two.
It's like when the Predator franchise and the Alien franchise started to get stale, and they're like, we can just throw them against each other. Bigfoot versus aliens.
we flew too close to the sun. It wasn't a good idea. But to think that they would give them traits of sort of like a magical or mysticism about them,
Do you
just
think
like
that
they
came
did.
about after Star Wars? And people that just took Star Wars way too seriously were like, oh my God, they've got these space Bigfoots.
Maybe.
Maybe our Bigfoot came from space.
Yeah, they saw Chewbacca and they knew that he came from his own planet or whatever, so
Yeah.
they're just like, that's the one that came here and dropped off Bigfoots. But they were assigning traits to them just like they did other animals. So that goes to show that there would have to be something to where they would have seen them enough or captured something in the woods. I'm not saying that they weren't bears, because there's a very similar traits that bears and Bigfoots have, or Bigfoot have.
Yeah.
But maybe not. Maybe not, man.
Okay, here's my 2 cents on spotting and the distinction between bears and Bigfoots. So I grew up hunting, so I've spent a lot of time like out in the hills, and one thing I can tell you is that I think if you're going out to try to find Bigfoot, your likelihood of finding Bigfoot is very slim. I think like a lot of the sightings and everything like that were probably like hunters and people out doing something else in the woods, loggers, hunters, things like that. Because, and then you're saying, well, where's the evidence and everything? Well, as a hunter, if you're using a scope and you're trying to sight up on something, if you're just saying you saw something moving through the woods, you either had to see it with your naked eye from a distance. And if you're, on an open hillside and it's more of a brown contrast background, you're going to, it's kind of a light, dusty brown. If you're going to see something dark brown moving from a distance, I mean, you'd have to be, for that to just look like a blob, you got to be, bears look like kind of blobs because they're more compact. Their fur hangs loose on them and everything. And so like all the description of Bigfoot, yeah, their hair's a little bit longer, but like it's not like the skin and the fat hangs off of them.
You see the muscle definition. You can see the fingers.
Yeah. So, sorry, what I was getting at more so is that if you're up there hunting or camping, you normally don't have a camera with like a big zoom on it. That's going to really like, even taking your phone, like now that we have, and you have just a standard, have a zoom lens on it. Once you zoom in, it degrades it, first of all. But then you also can't really see what you're looking at. So hunters, they have a lot of these sightings. They don't have a fucking telephoto lens with them. Or even a normal, you'd have to be up there, especially with like in the early days, you'd have to be up there with a camera for that sole purpose.
Yeah. You would have to be up there looking. You would have to have that purpose to be
You'd
able
have to do
it.
what's the video called, the Patterson Gimlin film?
Yeah, we'll
you'd
get
have
to
to be. I know you'd have to be up there for that purpose.
And what a crazy thing that they were up there for that
I
purpose,
know,
and somehow
I know.
they found one.
Listen, if you're going to be up there 100 times, you might get lucky one of those times.
You saw, I'm sure, throughout the research, the Mitch Hedberg joke
Yes.
about about Bigfoot's just being blurry. Like it's not the actual camera that's the issue.
Just the outside of them.
Bigfoot's just blurry.
Yeah. There's something about their fur that just makes it look like they don't have like sharp lines or angles or anything.
So maybe that's it. Maybe they're just blurry animals, blurry creatures.
That's true.
Well, one of the other conspiracy theories that I really latched onto because I think it's fucking funny. Maybe Big Timber is the reason that we aren't able to see the scientific
conspiracy,
research.
right?
Yeah. Because if Big Timber, if all of a sudden we find out that there's Sasquatch that live up in these forests,
It's going to be the goddamn snow owl situation all over again.
Yep.
It's going to be a snowy owl. You're going to have all of this land that Big Timber wants to get its fucking slimy hands on.
You can't.
Yep. All is protected Bigfoot habitat. So yeah, it's the same thing as the. Although I actually do believe the conspiracy that the car that could run on hydrogen and water
Yep.
does exist, and
Yeah,
then
I think
petroleum.
that
Yeah,
exists.
I think that's widely recognized as true. But as far as this goes, I think right behind that is easily Bigfoot v Big Timber.
But I want it to be real.
Foot versus timber.
Foot versus
Foot v timber.
I want it to be real. I want that to be the explanation. Like, I want it to come out one day where Weyerhaeuser, like any of the big clear cutting companies, has to come out and be like, "Look,
Like the head of that company is like the guy that owns it, and on his deathbed he's just like, tell the people,
tell the people,
tell the people, the Bigfoot is real. Stop the lies," and then just dies. His kids are in the room like, we're not fucking telling anyone.
and if we're being honest, I wouldn't even be mad at Big Timber for it. I'd be like, "Thanks, dude. I get why you did this."
Finally,
Yeah, but now at least you did the right thing eventually. Like, at least you told us about the Bigfoot out in the woods.
the one that's left in the will is the hippie, like grandkid.
And he just lets it all out. He lets all the family
The
secrets
people
out.
deserve to know, man.
But like you were saying, it's not always hunters that are making these spottings. There's a lot of, as we were just talking about, the timber industry, clear cutters, forest rangers, people that are out there doing things for the government. Those are also people that have seen them too. And those are kind of some of the ones that I lend a little bit more credence to. Not saying that the guy that goes out there in like secondhand hiking boots and hasn't showered in a week and has enough facial hair to be considered facial hair, but it doesn't grow in thick enough to actually be really
Which guy are
considered.
you talking about? Because we watched the same. Well, I mean, I'm sure we had some cross
Yeah.
research and everything. There was one that focused. I was telling you about this. I think
Todd?
No, it's not Todd. Are you talking about Todd?
Yeah.
Okay. There was another guy on a different one. What's his name? Todd what? Downing? Or
I don't know.
anyway. One of the ones I watched was almost like a Grizzly Man situation where the guy was obviously like had some type of like mental ineptitude. To what degree I don't know, but he had seen Sasquatch one time and would go up by himself with just like a crappy tent and camp for a while. But then he also had like this girlfriend in town that thought it was the greatest thing, that he stopped by like once a month to hang out and everything. She's like, I love our relate. It was so fucking weird. But he then went and met up with some other Bigfoot enthusiasts, and they were talking about stuff. And then it pans to him, and he has said some outlandish, crazy shit up to this point. It does like a talking head, like on The Office, where he's outside talking to the film crew, and he's like, "I think these guys are full of shit. I don't think these guys have ever seen a Bigfoot in their life." And it's almost you just want to fucking facepalm yourself and be like, "This guy is saying that."
I would believe a park ranger over, over
okay.
someone like that.
Yeah. I think those, putting those people on shows is what helps, like, or what doesn't help any of the believability of this at all. It puts in like an air of like craziness to it, which I mean, maybe a little bit.
Well, and it's the same thing with, again, maybe this is where it all comes from, but there's the same unfortunate crossover with alien sightings. Because when you hear about like an Air Force pilot that spots something on radar and they see it, that guy is 100% more believable than the dude that's down in Roswell in the back of his 78 Dodge van, and that's where he's living.
Randy
That's his
Quaid.
current address.
We're talking the Randy Quaid
Yep,
character.
yeah. Randy Quaid is going to be much harder to believe than an actual Air Force pilot. Like there's certain people that I would lend more believability to some of their stories, because part of the reason is they don't immediately jump to Sasquatch. It's like, I don't know, it was crazy. Like they give you enough context clues for you to jump to Sasquatch, but then they're not like, this was 100% a Sasquatch and it changed my life. It was just like, weird story, man. Gotta press on in the real world. Can't devote my life to whatever happened to me at this time.
So do you feel like do you have any accounts that might be a little out there, but that you either like or believe? There are certain ones that I read about and didn't give me a ton of information, but those are the ones that I really want to hear about. Did you hear the Albert Ostman one?
Again, for my research with this, I couldn't use any of that because it's secondhand knowledge.
No, I know it is, but
I didn't put a lot of focus into what people saw, like the actual experiences.
Well, this one was in 1924, and it became available like in the 1970s or something like that. I don't know if like it was a deathbed confession, but it was in 24, the Toba Inlet in British Columbia. He said he was kidnapped and held captive by a family of Bigfoot for 6 days.
For what reason?
I don't know. I didn't get. That's the whole point. I want to know this guy's story, and unfortunately, I didn't get too far into it. But that's a movie of the week right there.
Yeah, on like Lifetime.
Maybe
That's not a big major.
And then he
motion
falls
picture.
in love. Like one of the Bigfoot feels sorry for him, and then like releases him. It's like, go, my love.
It's a reverse. What's the vampire werewolf?
Oh, Underworld.
No, Robert Pattinson.
Oh,
It's reverse Twilight.
It's reverse Twilight.
Yeah, it's reverse Twilight with Sasquatch.
Yeah. Did you look into that? They made a series about it just a little while ago. It was on Hulu. Was it called Sasquatch? The one that investigated the 3 murders? Ooh.
Oh,
At the weed plantation?
yes, in Northern California.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it was like 1993. They said that a Sasquatch murdered 3 migrant workers, literally tore them like to pieces and everything in the Emerald Triangle in California. What a badass name for that area too.
Yeah.
Where all the grow operations were and everything up in the mountains. The Emerald
Mendocino,
Triangle.
Humboldt, and I forgot the third one. But yeah, the Emerald Triangle, I've been there, and when you go out into the woods, or when you're driving through and you see the country city, like, there's so much weed up there.
Yeah.
There has to be. Because before they had legal grow operations, they were growing it up in the forest just in random...
We're going to have to dedicate some time when we talk about maybe just like drug trafficking in the United States.
Oh, yeah.
Because the way that they would pipe in all of that, like dam of like little streams and gullies.
They
and
still
pipe
do.
in yes.
Yeah.
Back to Bigfoot. But no, so that's an entire documentary about essentially this story in 93 about, Sasquatch murdering these 3 migrant workers.
I wish it
at one of these
was.
places.
I wish it was Sasquatch, because it wasn't. It definitely wasn't.
Oh, no, it was-
There's certainly some foul play going on where Sasquatch
It's in a cartel grow operation. Like they probably ended up having one of like a couple of migrant workers like run off on him beforehand. And they're like, we got to keep them from running off into these woods. Just take 3 of them.
chop those motherfuckers up beyond all recognition. Make
Oh no,
them believe
don't
in Bigfoot.
pull them apart. Just get some cars and pull them apart so it's more believable. Sasquatch doesn't have machetes.
And that's one thing that you have to look for when you're trying to pick out what is a actual Sasquatch evidence and man-made.
Exactly.
Is there's always cut marks on the man-made stuff. Bigfoot doesn't have knives.
That's true.
Bigfoot breaks. He doesn't stab.
So Grover Krantz, what was kind of his? I've heard of him and I heard him get mentioned, but what was his like? How did he get into this?
So he got into it. I mean, I just got to take a second. We try to be impartial in this podcast, but I love this guy. Like I'd hang out with him. We'd go to the bar. I'd do whatever Grover wanted to do. He was an anthropologist, and he was born in Salt Lake City, which, if you're going to be born in anywhere to believe in anything mythical, Salt Lake City is definitely the place to be born into.
Was he an accredited anthropologist?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. He was a doctor.
Okay.
He worked up at Washington State. He was a professor. All of his students fucking loved him. And his deal was he was an anthropologist. So I think he was Anthropology 101. He devoted one class every semester to speaking about Bigfoot. And then every other class.
Not like a course.
One
class
one
during his
day
course.
of class that he would do his Bigfoot presentation and talk about all the work that he did, and then he would never mention it again unless he was asked about it. So these classes, they said that there were people at the school that weren't even taking the class that would come to the lecture hall to see it happen. He was everything that I heard about him, just a fantastic
This
guy.
is the man I want as the face of Bigfoot.
Yep, and 4 wives. He definitely was a man about town.
When you devote your life to Bigfoot, you're not going to have a lot of time for other things.
Excuse me, and this dude died, I think it was 2002. So, fairly recent. But his last wife, I listened to an interview with her. Jesus, bad burp. I listened to an interview with her, and she said for as devoted as he was to Sasquatch, and they actually met, she wrote him a letter. She wrote him a letter basically saying, like, hey, I'm a big fan of your work. I really support you. That was how their love story started. But his big thing, he didn't like...
She was a Sasquatch groupie?
Yep. Yeah, she was. She was. So his 4th wife, which I think they were together for like 25 years. So that was the one that stuck.
He needs to be doing it wife number right after wife number one. If he's like, I'm gonna have to figure out someone who's gonna be trekking through the fucking woods with me.
I'm just glad that the first three of them didn't go missing, and he's like, I don't know, I think Bigfoot took them.
Okay, that's
like,
better.
It was better that they were still real people
Still,
after
yeah,
that.
that would have ruined a lot of his credibility, I think.
Grover, beyond having an underrated name that I feel like needs a comeback in the name Grover, but as a Bigfoot guy, he didn't like camping. He hated going out and camping in tents.
You're a Bigfoot guy and you hate camping.
Yeah, I think this is where him and I
Okay.
really gravitate towards each other. But he retrofitted like an old Astro van and turned it into like a little traveling RV because he didn't want to go tent camping. So if they were like on a hike, they would only go so far away from where they had to stay because he wouldn't pitch a tent in the woods.
If we win the lottery, are you going to get a RV?
Oh yeah,
and deck it out for Bigfoot search?
When that happens, there's going to be that. Number two, we're putting a bounty out there for a Sasquatch. We're going to put up a $5 million reward for anybody that can bring us a Sasquatch. Because how great is that?
That we're going to get a lot of interesting non-Sasquatch.
You're going to get a lot of that, but at the same time, you're also going to spawn another generation of people that want to go out to find
Bigfoot
this.
gold rush.
Yeah. And not only that, if he's not real, we never have to pay.
That's true.
So you can just say that. It doesn't matter. You
like
don't even have to keep that money in the bank.
Whenever you say bounty now, I go instantly into a John Wick mode, and I just imagine a Sasquatch out in the woods just fucking taking out all of the Sasquatch hunters. And they're trying to get our bounty. I would watch that fucking movie.
Yeah.
Sasquatch John Wick.
And you would always be on Sasquatch's side. I feel like that's why Harry and the Hendersons work so well, is you want to sell it, or you want to like cheer for the family.
I don't like the vilification of Sasquatch in cinema.
No?
I don't like it when they make Sasquatch the monster.
He's not.
No.
He's just misunderstood, just like most monsters in the world.
Yeah.
Except for murderers. They're pretty understood.
Okay, so how does Grover get into it?
He starts off a skeptic. He starts off saying that he doesn't believe that Sasquatch is real.
Do you think when he moves up to like to Washington, do you think that area, being in that area, probably kind of like
hotspot? Yeah,
he's an anthropologist in that area. He's of course going to probably look into like local stuff, right?
yeah. And I assume kind of like what you say. Washington State's in Pullman. It's a pretty green kind of foresty area, so it would kind of make sense. It's not like as you get into more northern Washington where it's just all forest, but it's definitely a forest type area. And he kind of starts to see the link as far as we were talking about in the evolutionary line of thinking that now that the world is opening up and we're seeing that it wasn't just a straight line of how we evolved and that there were offshoots, he kind of became a little bit more agreeable to the thought that there could be something like that. And footprints were kind of like his big thing that started to get him into it. Because when you look at, there's real footprints and there's fake footprints. Like there's no way of getting around that. There's people that will carve footprints to be able to go out and walk. But there's certain ways that you can't create a foot like that.
It's the pressure. It's how the imprint is. Like there's certain parts that won't be as indented into the soil because you have arches and because you put weight on a certain side of your foot, depending on what the slope is and all that kind of stuff. So
some people stomp, but most people, when you walk, your heel hits and then everything rolls.
It's the same thing. If you're wearing the foot plates, if you're ever walking on a beach, walk with your flip-flops, then take off your flip-flops and take a few steps. And what you're going to see is if you were to look down, you're going to see certain parts of your arches are higher and lower and your toes press in at a certain point instead of actually everything just being one flat level.
Yeah, he was really
there has been both, admittedly. There's been
fake
footprints.
There's been plenty of fake ones.
More so than what they can even identify as possibly real ones. There's so many fakes, but there's certain things you can't really fake.
And even after Grover passed away and his family was going through his house, they found, I think he had 2 sets of fake Bigfoot feet that were in his basement that he had hidden with his other Bigfoot shit. So like he played into the fact where he's like, he was such a Bigfoot fan.
Know thy enemy. He had to know what these guys were doing.
Well, and I'm sure it's kind of like a fun memento to have.
Oh,
just like, I'm a Sasquatch guy. You got to have Sasquatch feet.
I was going to say something to also like make you understand that don't get too deep into this because there's wooden feet sitting right here.
And that's, there's whimsy to Sasquatch, and that's part of the reason why I love it, is you get to let your mind kind of do what I think it's supposed to do and just kind of create its own narrative for him. But
That next one, the Nepalese story, is one of my favorite ones.
yep, and he was a part of it. He
Was he
actually
really?
he got to see and study the Yeti finger.
Okay. This needs to be a goddamn spy movie.
Oh yeah. Before we get off at Grover for a second, after Grover died, he donated his body to something called the Tennessee Body Farm. Mm-hmm. And basically, after you die, they take you out there and they bury you and they let your body decay, and then they use that to like see what happens after a body dies for like criminological like.
Oh, okay. So it's to train almost like crime scene investigators.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for. What forensics?
Forensics.
Yes.
Yes.
So after he did that, I think he had English wolfhounds, and his body, his bones, and his English wolfhound's bones were all donated to like the Museum of Natural History or something like that. Like, just a very weird, eclectic guy that he actually wrote this stuff in his will that that's what he wanted to happen with his remains. So kind of cool,
Yeah.
like kind of nuts. And there's a podcast out there, I think it's called Wild Thing. And she's actually like a second cousin once removed of him.
Yes, I listened to her on.
Meat Eater.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
She was very, very good. But she shares a story about trying to figure out, like, she found him because she was reading an article about Bigfoot and was like, hey, that's interesting. We have the same last name. We're both last name Krantz. She goes and asks her dad, and she's like, hey, are we related to this guy? He asks Grandpa and says, do you know this name? And he goes, oh, yeah. Cousin Grover. He used to come to the family reunions, and he'd always bring like a measurement tool, and he'd walk around and measure all the craniums of everybody at the family reunion. So just like a fun, crazy dude. And he actually does play a story or a part in this amazing Nepalese monk story.
I feel like this needs to be like Golden Girl Sophia, like, picture it. Nepal, 1957.
This could be a movie, man.
That's what I'm saying, man. This needs to be like some type of like, you could do almost like a Ocean's 11 situation in this.
A great Yeti finger heist.
Exactly. So
Which sounds like a sexual thing.
So you have these monks in Nepal that actually have this sacred Yeti hand, and they kind of shared this with this guy named Peter Byrne. Is there any detail about Peter Byrne? I don't know. Like,
he was a Sasquatch guy.
Okay.
And I don't remember. He was over there. Him and his brother were both over there because there was a guy in Texas, and his name escapes me. But he was an oil tycoon, and he made a ton of money. So he actually sent them over to do studies in Nepal and along the Himalayas.
That's what people need to be doing with their money. Stuff like this. Okay, so he sees it, and I know that it didn't just go straight to him being able to smuggle the finger out.
No.
Didn't he see it? They wouldn't let him touch it or do anything or take it. So he went back to, was it England or something, and talked to somebody, and they proposed getting him a fake hand or like a hand from something else, like a gorilla hand or something like that.
Yeah.
And to do a fucking like switcheroo.
Which is fucking awesome when you hear the end of the story, because it's just like a double cross.
Yeah.
Basically. But not only did they have a Yeti hand, so there's this old, I don't know what religion or belief system it comes from, but supposedly man and Yeti had lived together in basically like in harmony, but they had to try to get rid of the Yetis for some reason.
Sounds like an offshoot of Buddhism. I
Yeah,
would
it could be,
imagine,
maybe.
like kind of living in that natural harmony.
But they had to get rid of the Yetis eventually. So they all drew them into kind of one area. Like, you know how they're doing the Kyle, Texas thing where all the Kyles are going down to meet in Kyle, Texas? They kind of like drew them all in together, and then the people tried to kill the Yetis to try to get rid of the entire population. Well, which hopefully it doesn't happen to the Kyles while they're down there. Maybe not the worst thing, but we just don't want people to die. But as the Yetis realized what happened and it was an ambush, they all escaped, except for one. They only killed one Yeti, and the rest of them scurried up into the mountains, and that's why they're mountainous-dwelling creatures, to try to hide from humans, because this one was killed. That hand...
Well, they were going to kill them all.
Yeah, so they thought they were coming after
Yeah.
all of them. So that hand and the top of the skull that had white hair that God knows where they actually got it were the two things that they showed Peter Byrne. So he sees these two relics from this ancient, far off, one of one. This is the only thing that we have left from this giant Yeti ambush that we tried to do.
Like, it kind of sounds like you had a whole Yeti. Like, these are the pieces you choose.
Well, yeah, I mean, to explain the Yeti genocide that you attempted, you have these like relics to be like, no, we tried to get rid of them. Like this was our plan the whole entire time. But that's where they came from. They were down in this monastery, and I think when Byrne went back, he made a deal that he could only take one finger.
I don't even think it was a deal. I think he stole
You
the
think
finger.
he stole the finger? Is that
I
what it
think
was?
so, because I know he went to do the switch and then somehow couldn't do that. But it was like he was able to get out with one finger. So I don't know if he's like, okay, great. And as he was turning his back, he just like snapped the fucking pinky off of it.
He snapped the pinky and he jammed it up his ass
Yeah.
and he carried it away.
And so he was able to smuggle it like to a flyer out of Nepal to Calcutta. And then
Calcutta, India, of all places, is where you fly out to with the Yeti finger.
this is the plot of an Indiana Jones movie. And so I imagine it when I'm talking about this, you know, where it shows Indy traveling and it fades out to the map and then it just draws the red line.
Yep.
And then stopping in Calcutta. And then who happens to be in Calcutta? Fucking Jimmy Stewart. Is Jimmy Stewart the one that used to talk like this?
The guy in It's a Wonderful Life smuggled a Yeti finger taken from Nepal, from Calcutta, India.
Knowingly.
Yeah, knowingly.
It was like, give it to me. I'm not going to get searched. I'm Jimmy fucking Stewart.
in his wife's underwear is what it was wrapped in their luggage.
You'd wrap it in the delicates because it's a very delicate thing.
He smuggled it all the way back to London. This is either the greatest or the worst caper story that I've ever heard of in my entire life. I don't know. But just the amazingness of all that had happened. And now we got this Yeti finger. So what are we going to do?
You gotta test it.
Well, we're going to sit on it for 20 fucking years because we don't understand what we're doing and how to use it. DNA testing comes along. Boom. We got a new in. We weren't sitting on it because we didn't know what to do with it. We were waiting for technology to catch up to what this is.
To have irrefutable evidence of this Yeti.
So they test the finger with DNA evidence. And unfortunately, they find out that the largest Nepalese man to ever have existed got his hand chopped off after he died, and they used it as a relic. Because it was human DNA, baby.
Almost wish Jimmy would have lost it on the way to London or something. Like something would have
He has to
happened.
cut some dude's hand off.
And after it tested as human, Jimmy and Stewart's in the background going, oh, shit.
He makes a call on like the layover, and he's like, hey, good news, bad news. Good news is...
Jimmy needs a hand.
Yeah. Good news is Jimmy needs a hand. Bad news is he needs it in 12 hours. You need a whole hand?
I know.
Actually, I'll just take a pinky.
I just need the pinky. Jesus.
And how cool is that? Like this is as far, just like you were talking about. This is as far as we were willing to go that proved that this mythical creature that we really have no evidence of, besides what's coming up, because we have to get into what we know. But we're international capers are happening over a fucking Yeti finger, something that we still are pretty sure doesn't exist, but can't say it isn't. That's wild to me. We don't even put this much effort into shit that we know exists. Rhinos are dying at a very quick clip.
No one's staging an Ocean's 11 fucking coup for goddamn rhinos right now. Oh.
Yeah, nobody's trying to steal the ivory horn from some extinct rhino to try to bring it back to life or to prove that it ever existed.
We have the ability to, like, I know that we've talked about this before about the whole cloning thing. We literally have the ability to clone animals to save them from extinction. Why aren't we doing that? Like, someone would pay for that, right? Be like, yeah,
try
I'll
to
give
bring
you some
back a Yeti?
Well, that depends on if we can find legitimate Yeti stuff. No, but like fucking like white rhinos.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, why are we not trying to do
like
what
they
we're
don't
trying
have
to
to be
do with
extinct.
mastodons? Is that what they are? Mastodons that we're trying to bring back
Yeah,
through
well, mammoth.
elephants?
Yeah.
So why more
We have
recent
shit,
history?
We got shit dying right now.
Yeah.
That we could probably save.
Maybe
and then
let's
bring some other shit back later.
Yeah, let's work that way. Plus, we're trying to bring back something that lived in a time that was so much colder than it is now.
We're bringing it back because we're probably going to figure out if we can, like, eat it.
if mastodon tastes good.
Yeah, that's going to be a huge thing. And then there's going to be an entire like fucking culture of gym bros that are going to be on nothing but like the mastodon kick. It's going to be
Mastodon liver.
yeah, that's what it's going
It's
to
going to
be.
be mastodon crossed up with Liver King.
Exactly. If you're not eating the whole mastodon, snout to tail. All right. Bathroom break and then get into the evidence?
Yeah.
All right. All right. While we take a break from class and take care of some business, you can also take care of some business.
If you don't follow us on Instagram or Twitter already, our Instagram handle is Historically High Pod. That's Historically High POD. And our Twitter is Historically High. That's Historically HI.
All right. And back to our show. All right. Back to the meat of the issue.
Yeah. Before we jump into the evidentiary qualities that we have, just to kind of talk about where we sort of think Bigfoot may have evolved from. Gigantopithecus is an extinct. This is where I'm going to have trouble being
Hominid?
stoned. An extinct genus of ape that we saw that lived roughly between 2 million and 350,000 years ago. So
We don't have a lot to go off of on it, though.
no,
But,
no, we have a few jawbones.
few jawbones and a shit ton of teeth.
Yeah, like 20,000 teeth or something like that. And judging by that, you can kind of look at it and see, okay, these are larger teeth. This looks like a very thick, muscular jawbone, or not a thick, muscular jawbone, but like a thick, tough jawbone. So it's going to have to be eating a lot because those muscles and everything are going to have to be moving it, and it's going to have to be tough. But one thing that we've seen with great apes is that's not really indicative of their size. It's more indicative of like what their food sources are.
Yeah.
Because anything that's going to take, obviously, it's not going to be eating foliage if it's going to be eating something tougher like a bambooish. I don't know if they eat that, but if they have to eat something that's tougher, their jawbones are going to be bigger.
Yeah.
So the notion that we have that Bigfoot everywhere and Yetis are huge and all that is sort of like what we've built it into, and judging by legends.
So the way they went about it is they've seen enough jawbones of so many other species that based upon the shape of the jawbone, they're able to determine what like the species almost like could look like. So based upon like humans have a jawbone that's only specific to humans, just like, and then, but that also explains about us how we are like bipedal and stuff because the way our jawbone faces and all this kind of stuff. So they've seen so many species that they can actually determine that it was kind of ape-like and everything. And the jawbone doesn't look like a human jaw. It does, but it doesn't. Like it's super thick, like certain parts of it. But then you think about like how that would go into a face. They kind of show how it would fit. You're like, okay, it almost looks like a mash between a gorilla and a human face, like, but just elongated in certain ways.
Yeah, I don't know how you would tell forehead size and depth from a jawbone, but somehow they can. And I'm not going to question that because that's science and it's taken us to places, it's taken us to the moon. So I'm not going to question how any of that works. I'm just going to take them at their word.
I have like 2 semesters in jawbone reconstruction, like at maximum. So these guys have degrees.
There's a lot of people in the world that don't believe in science. I am one that just fully wholeheartedly believes in whatever the scientific community says. And when they come back and say that they were wrong and they have now figured something else better out, I agree with them because I can't question them on that.
Correct.
So we think that, or they think that it's coming from the Gigantopithecus genus. But last known, or I guess the most recently known artifacts were around 350,000 years old. So that lends to a very huge time. But it also sort of plays into the theory that Sasquatch was real. It just isn't around anymore. It's an extinct species.
Genus and yeah. And on the other flip side of that, just in kind of argument for the fact that there can be different, almost like genuses of humans, like different species. For a while, there was like a pygmy, like dwarves.
Oh, hobbits is what they were called.
Yes. And there was, for a while, living with like men and everything.
Do you think that's where
unlike
Tolkien
Lord of
got the idea? When I heard this, I wanted to text you so bad, but then I immediately
just
was like,
making that
save it.
connection just now. But how do you hear that ever in your life? And then you go to write a fantasy story, and you're like, how do I not include that? Like men and half men?
Yeah, you have to. Like there's science to back up the Hobbit somehow. Like to it's just such another layer and level of Tolkien.
But that's just to kind of lend credence to the idea that there are different offshoots and different genetic anomalies and evolutionary like roads that they take. It's usually just in situations where the most efficient for the time are the ones that become the dominant and the ones that actually survive.
Yeah, or we've kind of found a better way, and I'm sure it's just because everything is so different now, but like we still have genetic anomalies. We still have people that are born with an extra finger that have web feet and all that kind of stuff. But back when there were only so many genetic codes and there was only so many different chromosomes and smaller populations and they would breed, that's how you would get these anomalies that would then become more prevalent because it's not really incestuous, but it's like there's just enough of them to where there's only so many breedable matches in the genes.
Yeah.
I guess you would say.
Or if, and this might be just kind of like digging too far into it, but if you have like a society where you're ostracized for certain genetic traits, be it different eye color, stuff like that, and then you're kind of ostracized into a sect of people that are similar to you and everything and share that same genetic trait, then that is your breeding pool.
That whole pool is fucking. And
yeah, exactly. And so that can then, be indicative of like the branching off of certain genetic traits and everything like that. That's actually just kind of basic evolution, because isn't that how people like have intermingled and created new like so?
Yep. And that's why people that usually have like more of a rough term to use would be like a mutt human that has a lot of different things in there. They usually tend to be pretty sturdy folks because they have so many different.
They've adapted all the best, like, genetically, just in that fight to establish dominant genes.
Yeah.
They've picked the best and the strongest.
Yeah. So integration, positive.
That's the exact opposite of what they believe eugenics is.
Yeah. Well, eugenics, I don't know if it gave us this, but there's a reason why the British royal family is like all pasty and hemophiliac, and if there's a cut that happens,
Charles's hands are all fucking swollen and
and it's because for centuries all of the ruling classes in Europe all just traded back and forth with princes. Yeah, they're all products of incest, and that's why they're all really like pale, and that's why I think hemophilia is a pretty big one with incestuous stuff, but that's why they're all weird. And I don't know who jumped in there that was a redhead, like what redheaded prince jumped in there to create.
Harry and William are then trying to do work and bring in better gene pools from the outside.
Yeah. Kate Middleton's probably still pretty right up their alley, but that's a necessary thing to bring the commoner genes in.
She's not in their gene pool, though.
Yeah, she's not a part of the... Yeah. She doesn't royal blood.
Harry's even going further to try to help these people. And he's being ostracized for this shit.
Yeah, he's trying to bring a little spice to the bloodline, and they hate the man.
He's trying to, shore up the weaknesses.
That's all he's trying to do is make sure that he lives, or that his children live longer than he did.
He'll have the last laugh in the end.
I hope so.
You wait and see.
I really hope so. I completely forgot where we were.
We're at evidence now.
Oh, okay.
Footprints. Do you want to start at footprints?
Yeah, I think what we just did was spent 10 minutes trying to explain why Bigfoot should be real and why he still is real. And that's what I find myself doing every single time I look into something, is I start to try to figure out the justification for why it can happen instead of why it can't. And the evidence I do the exact opposite with. Because the evidence is finally like, when push comes to shove, there is no theory here on what it is. This is either it is or it's faked.
I have trouble separating the two. Good for you.
I just... I want, there's just parts of it where I want him to be real, but I want the evidence to just make total sense. And footprints, like we were just talking about, are the most commonly fake thing that happens.
They're the most commonly found, and they're the easiest to try to replicate. So, of course, they're going to be the most common.
Because you're talking about evidence. Unless you have a Bigfoot that you shot and killed and brought in, if you don't have a bigger specimen than that, there's really not a whole lot else that you can bring.
Nowadays there are. You could actually bring in probably a finger at this point and have them do genetic testing on it. And unless it nailed so close to human, that there were no recognizable differences, I mean, we can do genetic testing at this point where we can probably get real down in there.
Yeah.
All deep in there, like.
Well, and here's how it is, though. If you're ever that close to a Sasquatch, and
That's true. I was
you
going to say,
can
I don't
get
know how
that.
you're getting the finger.
Yeah, you're not getting a finger off
Yeah.
that guy. Like you, if you're close enough to get a finger, you're close
You
enough
might
to
shoot
bring a
the
dead
finger
body.
off, actually, is what's going to end up happening.
And then he's gonna tear your head off if he catches you.
I was going to say, he just looks around trying to grab the finger off the ground.
Yeah.
Grabs it and runs off into the woods.
So you would call it like trace evidence. We have trace evidence in footprints that don't prove necessarily, you can't, I don't know if you can pull DNA off of it or whatever, if it would be degraded, but you have to look at things called dermal ridges. And dermal ridges are basically the scientific word for fingerprints.
Yeah.
And you have fingerprints all over your body, I guess maybe just your toes and your hands, because you don't really have
not so
skin
much all
prints
over your
anywhere
body.
else.
Your nipples.
A nipple print.
I think actually, I'm not even shitting you. I think there is something that your nipple is as unique as your fingerprint, like the layout of it.
Everybody's got different areolas, and we celebrate all areolas
That's right.
on this show. But yeah, the other thing that leads me, we're not going to talk about it. I just want to plant this in your mind right now. Dermal ridges, fingerprints. Mm-hmm. Is that the next evolution to us being able to climb on things? Because it provides enough surface area to where when you stick your hand on something and drag it down, it provides more surface because there is a ridge.
Do you
like
think
a
that's?
shoe.
Are you asking me if I think that's like the next evolutionary trait up?
Either that, or because we don't have to do it, our fingerprints are less noticeable. Like in 200 years, are people going to have fingerprints? Because it's something that we don't need.
I don't know. I think maybe it's a leftover evolutionary trait for when we needed our hands to be rougher and they needed to have more grip. And we've just lost it because our skin has become thinner over time.
That's what I'm saying. So in 200 years, and again,
So
not
no,
a part
the
of the
next
podcast.
step is not Spider-Manning up a wall. If anything, our
Opposite of
hands are only going to
Spider-Man,
get,
yeah.
it's going to be
I
the
didn't
opposite.
think
Our
that
hands are
through
gonna get
before I
smoother.
said it.
Yeah.
But I knew it was either one way or the other. But that's a topic for a different day.
Okay.
But dermal ridges on the bottom of feet are, you're able to tell that is, apes have different dermal ridges than we do. We both share that same quality and trait. Almost called it a twait. But it's something that is identifiable. So when you have a casting or something like that you're walking around in on a fake footprint, you're not going to be able to get that in depth to be able to leave something like that.
Okay, so
because
some of
they're
the footprints have
microscopic.
displayed dermal ridges. Is that what
Yeah.
you're trying to get? Okay, that's where you were trying to get. I was trying to figure out where you're going with this. So some of the footprints that have been the ones that have had the different arches and the different pressures have actually also had dermal ridges in the cast. Okay.
So you're able to see, kind of being able to weed out, yes, this is fake. This one lends more to be real because unless this is made of some sort of silicone that bends with the foot,
Yeah.
like it just, there's more credible shit out there for as far as footprints than just they're all fake.
Well, the reason that there's so many is because they're the easiest to fake. So I mean, it's
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I wonder why handprints haven't become a thing. Maybe it's because they want to push bipedal more. But you would think that
There would
eventually
be no
there's going to be a
reason.
handprint.
There would be no reason to do a handprint
Unless they're standing up, which we will get to on the Skookum cast.
Okay. No, but I don't think it would be harder to even do handprints because they're walking around on their legs. They may be touching trees and stuff, but
You don't think they ever need to like fall and
I
get
don't
up?
think like the Harry and the Hendersons costume had.
You
Was
don't
worried
think there's
about
the handprint where-
dermal ridges.
where
No.
he's trying to walk through into the living room and he hits his head, so he grabs the I-beam that's holding up the whole thing and just pushes it up and breaks it so he can walk through it.
Maybe, I don't know. All right. Nests.
And this was something that we debated, you and I, prior to talking about nests, and I tried to lead you down there. You remember when we were texting back and forth about them living in caves? Mm-hmm. I was trying not to use the word nest because I wanted you to come across as naturally, because nest seems like the weirdest thing that a Bigfoot could live in.
I don't think so. You know,
I think nest, I think bird.
gorillas make nests.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Have you not seen the Disney classic Tarzan?
Is that the one with Brendan Fraser?
No, that's George of the Jungle.
I've seen that one.
Okay. Gorillas, yes, that's where they bed down. Like they bed down and make nests, just like out of like leaves and all that kind of stuff.
I knew
it would-
Paddington Bear. He lived up in the trees.
No, this should lead in even more credence to you believing this. Then, since you didn't know that, yes, gorillas sleep in nests.
I'll be damned.
So there's been a few instances where people have come across basically these areas where there have been multiple, for lack of a better term, they are nests. And it's not just like they piled up like leaves on the side and kind of made like a shallow bowl or anything like that. They're intricately like woven like sticks.
That's what I was
and
going to get to.
leaves.
So gorillas don't have like a weaving ability.
I don't know. They may, but the reason they know that the gorilla has nests is because they have found gorilla nests and they've observed them doing it. So if they have found them, I would assume that they would have to stand up like a woven nest, because if they're just like piling leaves up, a wind comes through and it could scatter that and kind of move all that stuff around.
fair.
But if it's put together and it's like a place they're going to stay at for a while, if it's where they live and everything, I would assume that they're going to build something sturdier.
The process of weaving depends so much on dexterity and fingers and knowledge that it pushes it so far past like what a bear could do, because a bear couldn't weave. All a bear has is a paw and claws.
Yeah.
I think I heard that elk make nests as well.
No, that's just like they use their like
they
hooves
rut
and
out a
antlers,
hole and then
they
lay in
basically
it, or-
like tear up the dirt until where it's like a soft, try to get an inch of
Okay,
like dirt
yeah.
in there to where it's a little more.
But to think that they would have the forethought of something like if maybe gorillas have a rough weave. These things were fairly intricate. Like it wasn't like if you looked at somebody that was making, and you can Google this. All you have to Google, the easiest one to find is Bigfoot nests on the Olympic Peninsula, I believe is what it is. But there's definitely, it's not a pattern weave, but there is a weave to it.
It's like a bird nest.
Yeah,
They said it's
okay,
got
yeah.
it's a structural.
It's random,
weave.
but it is still.
Yeah, it's
woven.
not something that can occur
Not like
naturally.
a crosshatch pattern.
Correct.
Okay.
It's a collection of branches that are interwoven together in a nest form to hold essentially their shape and everything. Nature doesn't do that. Like you can't say, and that's going to come into the tree structures next too.
Yeah, I want to try to explain away a nest. I want to try to make that not make sense, because the more that it makes sense is the more it leads me to believe that it's
The
real.
only explanation is that people made them.
Yeah, and again,
And would have to make them in with the intention to deceive. It's not like I'm saying like people are like, no, they're just setting up camp there or something like that. No, like you're having to sit there and make them yourself.
yeah, there's a certain level of commitment that I would give if I was trying to be a Bigfoot hoaxer, and strapping Bigfoot feet to my feet and walking like down a pathway or something like that. I would do that shit all fucking day. That would be the most fun that I had.
I
to
told
go
you
out.
you would look fantastic in a Bigfoot suit.
Yeah, and if I didn't have so much respect for Bigfoot, I would say that we'd have to go out and make our own Patterson Gimlin film. Like I feel like I could dress up. I could play the part of Bigfoot pretty well because I pretty much have all the features.
You could play Patty.
Except for the bulbous, large hanging breasts that Patty had. But
Be Patrick.
yeah, Patrick. I'd be Patrick. I'd be Patty's husband. But the nests.
I heard you perverts made a video of my wife 50 years ago. I want it back.
The time that it would take to go out and weave a random nest in the middle of the forest just to deceive people is such like
They found like 5 or 6 of them.
Yeah, and
in like
they-
different sites.
They found them all over. To do that, to put that much effort in for such a low payoff doesn't make sense. The the footprints make sense to me completely, because
Oh yeah,
you
the
do that on a
reward
couple
has got to be
trails.
almost instant.
Yeah.
After you get done, you're like, I know someone's gonna find these.
I'm bringing Crazy Town to whatever pathway that I'm on.
Yeah.
But these random nests out in the forest, it doesn't make any sense because there's just such a low payoff to try to get your rocks off to do it.
I don't know what the details were on the second one, but I know the first one I heard about was that it had been like an area where they were just going in to start logging or something. So I don't know to what degree the accessibility to that area would have been.
Like they built the road like 10 years ago, but
Yes.
the nest looked to be older than that.
No, they looked at like they did some type of, they tried to do like take cross sections and send them in for testing, and they found like some type of hair in them. And I don't know, I'm not saying like some type of hair to like in like we don't know what it was. I just can't remember. It wasn't like an identifiable hair. It was an animal hair, like horse hair or something like that.
Yeah, it was identified.
Yeah, but they said that it also could have been contaminated because they had been riding horses back through there, because that's how you can kind of get around in these wooded areas.
Before there's a road, you have to have a mode of
Exactly. And they
transportation.
could have also, someone could have ridden their horse around this area and the horsehair could have been trapped by the wind. But anyway, the whole point isn't so much the testing of this, it's that these nests were built and someone would have had to be, like I said, the counter argument to it. It's someone went out just in the middle of the woods without the intention of knowing what they were building this for years and years before, because of how they figured out that these things were worn, like the age of the branches that they used, all that kind of stuff.
The
And
lowest payoff of any hoax.
exactly, to hope that one day it was going to go ahead and pay off.
But if they did, credit to them, because that's fucking awesome.
That's long play.
That's the longest con that you could ever expect to happen.
Can you imagine had that been the case, just to play that side of it, and someone is sitting there and they finally hear it mentioned, and they're like, "Didn't we do that like 12 years ago?"
That would be like blowing the biggest load that
Yes.
you could ever imagine. Just that feeling. You'd just be instantly hard and then just
Or
blow
if you feel like it
immediately.
didn't get the attention it deserved, it fizzled out so quick. You're like, "God damn it!"
You're dropping hints in town. You're like, yeah, I heard somebody was up that way.
Heard a bunch of weird noises up in the wood there yonder. Someone ought to go check it out.
Playing with the nest too. We have these very odd, sort of surprisingly artistic tree structures, which I can't even really begin to explain. Besides, they look like I want to call them a teepee, but they're just not.
No, I mean, okay, you have a tree I think it's always a tree that's still alive, and then in the middle, and they basically are able to lean over other trees like that they've taken out of the ground and broken off, so they're not like
Not cut.
they're not cut, but there's also like it's not like a tree falls over, because if a tree just falls over, then its root system is going to be somewhere close to it within the vicinity.
Yeah.
They're actually like taken away. They can't find their root systems. So they're basically like broken off and then carried over and set. And then they basically can set them in a way against a living tree and almost form like a teepee like structure, or some type of like what you could, if you could stretch like a canvas around it, you could make like almost like a tent.
And again, through the brain that this doesn't want to be real, I think a million times, okay, well, there had to have just been a big wind that came through. Somehow that tree was weaker at the time, or it had a larger snow load. So that wind
If I hear
snapped that.
snow load, God damn it. The fact that you fucking use that term.
It's
I was
the
going
only
to
thing
text
that you
you
can
watching
use.
that last night and be like, if I hear this guy say fucking snow load one more goddamn time.
Well, you heard me say it. But, like, the wind would have to blow in every conceivable direction
No, I'm in
for
complete,
that to happen.
I'm in complete agreement with you on that. The way that like, and for them to fall that way in a certain order to still be structurally sound. Here's my counter argument to that. I have it to, but not like, okay, I'll just explain it. So for the ones that they found that they were able to access pretty easily, it looked like there was maybe a road next to it or anything. Traditionally, roads are based off of trails, that were made essentially by people on horseback.
Path of least resistance.
Correct. It wouldn't go without being reasonable that, and this wasn't just like one tree structure that they found. There were several instances within a few miles of each other, and then like a third one where trees had fallen in this pattern in a way that they could not fall in naturally. Okay. What I'm saying is the ones that were closer, like down to the path, I could see that being like people, like shepherds coming through or someone coming through and actually making that and then stretching canvas and having a tent, because once you pack up and if you stay there for a couple days, you're not going to take the lodge poles with you, because you can just cut down new lodge poles a few days down the road or do whatever you're doing.
If you made it once, you can make it twice.
Exactly. When they went up the hill and had to like hike up a long fucking way up where there's no pass or anything, and then got up to that huge like rocky area, and then there was another one made up there. That one I was like, that one has no business being up there. I don't know who would bring branches up there to do that kind of stuff.
Well, and there are some of them, like the one that looked like it wasn't really set up in a teepee, like a triangular shape.
Yeah.
It was like set up flat almost.
Yeah.
And you could see like from the top angles how the trees were kind of interwoven between them. And I spent as much time as I could trying to tell myself, when a tree needs to grow, it finds where light goes, and that's how it bends around.
Yeah.
And I tried to convince myself that it weaved in and out of all these broken trees in order to find the light in the forest. And I tried as hard as I could to do it, but I just couldn't. Like, I couldn't talk myself into that being something that was accidentally happened. Happenstance that 15 trees in that area somehow broke and laid on each other, and the rest of them grew up through it.
I do have to preface this. Well, I guess we've already said it, so it's not a preface. I have to follow it up with this. The provider of this information seems like he could possibly maybe be the kind of person that would travel out in the woods before happening to be videotaping with a certain survivor man and maybe possibly construct some of these. Here's the thing is he would have to construct them in such a way that they like he wasn't like scratching off like fresh marks on the and everything. He would have to find everything dead already on the ground and doing all that stuff. It's a lot of work. This guy seems like he might put in some work.
He didn't have a whole lot of priorities inside of the city.
No, whereas you had just talked about Grover Krantz being a, someone that you could look at, credible, obviously a learned man.
Yes, very much so.
This guy, is it Todd?
Todd.
This guy, I can't remember his last name.
The name is very fitting of the character.
He does a lot of Bigfoot talking, and hears a lot of stuff that other people, when they're with him, they don't hear, and then stops and is like, "Do you hear that?" Yeah, that's Sasquatch. Like, just instantly, like, any noise, did you hear that? Oh, no, that's Sasquatch.
This is the guy that would probably take it serious enough if he was hiking along somebody and they farted. He'd be like, "Holy shit, did you hear that?" And the guy's like, "Yeah, I just farted." He's like, "I don't think that was you. I think I heard a Sasquatch."
That's right. The flare video you showed, this guy states that he was in an altercation. Their version of altercation. So he was intimidated by a group of 6 to 7 Sasquatch late at night. He has video evidence. He was scaring them off with the flare, yelling at them, "Yeah, yeah." But then when he goes to talk about it, he seems very like, to me, that would be a terrifying experience that would probably scare me out of the woods for the rest of my life. Regardless of my passion for Bigfoot, I would study it from afar. I would fund other people to go into the woods.
There would be no time that I could ever tell that story to be where I couldn't, like, my heart rate wouldn't rise. I wouldn't start sweating. Mm-hmm. Like, to relive that experience at any point in time, I could never say casually.
Yeah.
Not Todd.
Not Todd.
Todd's a tougher man than I am.
Perfectly calm, perfect clarity of the situation. I don't know what else to say about Todd and the tree structures after that.
All I can say is I can't explain them away, which is why we're still so invested in Bigfoot. Mm-hmm. And I understand people that are on the surface level. I feel like I'm maybe a little bit further than surface level Bigfoot understanding, but you can't explain it away.
I have a theory, and it's going to play into this sightings thing that you have put right here. The wild men of the woods. So there are, just like for some information, 48% of the United States is uninhabited. I'm not saying unexplored. I'm saying uninhabited.
These are the numbers you hit me that I just was in shock.
48% of the Pacific Northwest is forested. And the Pacific Northwest does not contain the most populous states. Some of them are kind of average and everything like that. So Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Northern California is kind of what we're considering is that's the Bigfoot ring of fire.
Yeah, Vancouver, Canada, Southern Canada.
Yeah, that whole stretch like Canada. Up there. 48% of that is forested. So if you're saying half of it, just even say it goes with the rest of the United States and says half of it is uninhabited, half of it is forested.
But 2% is the only separation. That's when you think about the amount of people that live in the Pacific Northwest, which I'm sure is in the millions. We have to be able to have that much room, plus all the other forests around them. All that's just uninhabited.
Exactly. And if you're thinking about it too, it's not like 40. If you took a map and you said, half of it is uninhabited, you got to put those into really like concentrated dots around like Seattle, Spokane, and then in certain other areas, and then it's very open for the rest of it.
Yes.
So kind of going after that, and even previously, like when we were first settling the areas and everything, and the country was founding itself, you had people that went up there with families and everything that didn't always just go to like settlements or keep going on the road. You had people that just like decided to try to make a life by pulling off the road and going up this way into the mountains, maybe. Or something happened that forced them to stop and they had to live there for the rest. And then they had generations and everything.
Yeah.
If you get people that are like, this kind of is going to sound a little tinfoil hatty or anything like that, but
Bro, we're talking Bigfoot.
I understand.
No such thing.
No, like let's just say you get certain situations where you do in a certain way can do like micro evolutions and everything. So you get a couple of generations of family that have had to survive in a harsh and like tougher environment. You're automatically almost going to be a stronger person.
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to necessarily grow to be like, if your family's height is 6 foot, I don't think you're going to reach 7 foot within a couple of generations or anything.
Only way I'd argue that is giraffes.
I don't know enough about giraffe physiology.
It had to have just been a horse, but it didn't have enough food.
I can't get
so
into
its
this
neck
with you. I got to
grew
stay
longer.
Bigfoot right now. Let me stay focused on this thought process. God damn it! Did you just? Okay, never mind. I got where I was going. Okay,
Sorry.
So you, even though if you had like a family where maybe even at that point your average is 6 foot tall, and you have generations and have some discrepancies between the 6 foot higher and larger, you could kind of de-evolve from a societal standpoint and everything, where you're living off the land, you're not sociable around people, you're hyper defensive. There's probably some interbreeding going on if it's going to go ahead and be like an isolated pocket of people.
Yeah.
You're going to be wearing animal skins and everything like that. So you do have situations where there could be, even in that way, an offshoot of like American or like early settler society that doesn't trust people. What's the movie where there's the village? It's called The Village. It's the M. Night Shyamalan one, where it's like the community that is living back in the Amish or whatever time, like Salem witch trials time, whatever colonial.
Yeah.
But she gets out of the woods and all of a sudden discovers it's like fucking modern day Boston and can see the skyline from like 15 miles away. You have the possibility of communities that would be like avoiding people and everything, that have established themselves out in these crazy places in the woods. You take a fucking flight to Seattle and you fly in and you look in any direction, flying in for miles and miles and miles. It is all forested area. There are inaccessible places where, airplanes have flown over them. You can look down, but you're never close enough. There are places within that have never been touched by human hands. Mm-hmm. Very large swaths of land that have not been touched by human hands. And if you're a generation of, and I'm not saying these people are Bigfoot. What I'm saying is this is how it's possible for the legend of Bigfoot and stuff like this to have happened. You just have people that live up in the mountains and everything, and they don't go around people and everything, and they just kind of devolve into a society like that.
And maybe this is me just drawing the wrong parallel, but I don't think there is a better understanding of what your climate and surroundings does to you than Seattle and grunge music. As far as like any kind of that kind of music that would come from an area would have to come with an area of like cloudiness and rain and sort of like a depressionary feeling.
Yeah.
So to think that a Yeti that lives in the Himalayas and blends into the surroundings of kind of the snow and everything would be white.
Yeah.
And a Sasquatch would come to an area where there's a ton of rain and there's a ton of forestation, and their coat would naturally adapt to become a darker brown.
Darker brown, sometimes even black, depending on.
Yeah. Like we see these patterns happen in humans more culturally now than we see like physical genetics change.
Yeah.
But I do have another weird outside crazy brain, probably no evidence to back it up, but there's a reason why people that live in like Eastern Bloc colder countries are more hairy. Mm-hmm. And I believe it's because their body over the generations that they've lived there have decided to keep the hair that we've all shed in hotter destinations.
You tried to, this kind of leads me into, you tried to provide, you asked me about like fire. They'd have to have fire to survive the winters and everything. Well, if they come from the Yeti never, there's never any talk about the Yeti needing fires or caves. No. They were bred for that. Like musk oxen, like hair, like the big long hair.
Yeah.
It stands to reason that if Bigfoot in the Pacific Northwest stayed in that region, that they would have to go ahead and keep a trait like that. And that's why they would also have nests and everything to try to keep warm that way. They wouldn't need fire.
Yeah, the possibilities are really just kind of endless. And I think, kind of coming back to sightings, the sightings that happen, it's not really like anything else because you see dead deer on the freeway. Like, deer are only so smart that they're going to try to run across the freeway.
I
If
feel like the farther we get into this, the more stoned you get, the more you're like steering into the Bigfoot lane.
it's got to be, and we'll kind of
I
talk
like how
about it
this
at
passion. I feel like you're just letting the truth come out at this point.
yeah,
I love it.
yeah. No, at the end we'll kind of talk about. I want to ask you because I want to know why you want Bigfoot or why you would want Bigfoot to be real.
Okay.
Because I have a very like just loving feeling about this, but if we are going to say that Sasquatch is Gigantopithecus, we're some sort of cousin, some distant cousin twice removed
Some
or
offshoot of
whatever, their brains have to be smart enough to be able to avoid things. And this is something where I feel like it goes 50-50 because there will be people that see Bigfoot, and they'll say, he was smart enough to avoid the trail cameras that I set up on the trail.
Yeah, that's a big piece of like of the evidence of why he's never been photographed unexpectedly or something like
Yeah.
that to where you couldn't see. But there's tons of trail cameras all over. Here's the whole point. You have to be able to, as a person, get to the places to put the trail cameras. And yes, you could go up and you could put trail cameras in all of the hardest places, but how many of those trail cameras they're putting out are all the actual like hardest places to get to? Where you
Yeah.
would think that if a creature or something like that is going to survive and maintain distance away from human contact, it's going to be in the hardest places to reach.
And even
That's the safe thing for like an animal. That's like part of like even like a safe thing is like get to the high ground or get to where I can't get gotten as easily.
well, and that's why cities that are more rural and kind of more in the mountains, you'll see it won't be weird to be like, yeah, there's a deer or there's a deer that comes down from the mountains that hangs out in this neighborhood or something like that. But I don't believe that big feet are that or big. God damn it, I can't get the plurality
You
down.
say Sasquatch.
I don't think that Sasquatch is smart enough to be able to avoid cameras. I think that is where you have to kind of put a little logic to
Okay.
it. But I do think that they are smart enough that when they see big things flying very fast down a freeway, that their modern inclination is to be like, dangerous, don't cross. I don't think
yeah.
big I don't think Sasquatch has to be hit by a car for us to be like, that guy is definitely real.
Here's
So I
the
think
other-
he's that smart.
Here's the other thing too. The number that it puts Sasquatch at to have like a viable population essentially is only 2,000. I know that sounds like a lot. You're like, oh, so there's got to be
ain't shit.
2,000 Sasquatch. It's not shit when you really think about it. How many deer? And you're like, well, there's deer get hit all the time. I see them all the time. There are so many fucking deer around the Pacific Northwest. It's fucking insane. So many different other animals that get hit and everything. It's because there's a lot more of them. I'm not sitting here like saying like absolutely there's Bigfoot. What I'm saying is you can't use that as an argument.
That's why this is the greatest topic to
I know,
talk about.
I know,
'cause
'cause
you
you can
have
get
to
so
justify
fucking
the
into it.
unjustifiable.
But yeah, so and here's the other thing too. Back to the trail cameras. Oh, he's not smart enough to avoid the trail cameras. Like I said, there are places and areas that which people just can't really get to. You would literally have to be like, there's no road in there. The closest road is within miles of where I need to go. I can't get to that point. And then to say like, well, you can get dropped off by a helicopter, you're still having to try to pick a needle and throw it about where you want to take your chance about putting these trail cameras. It's not a reason enough to say, I guess my argument is that's not an argument to say that it doesn't exist.
There's two kinds of islands. There's the island where it's inaccessible because there's water that you would have to traverse to get to there. But there are dry islands where the geography around it is so impassable that you can't get into.
Or you wouldn't need to. For
Yeah,
any other
there's-
reason
there's
than
no
trying
reason.
to prove a point about I'm gonna prove that there's no Bigfoot here by flying into this remote area and putting 1,000 trail cameras out.
There's one reason why you would go into that reason, and it's to find Bigfoot. And people that do want to go find Bigfoot, unfortunately, are not athletically inclined enough to be able
That's
to
right.
make that happen.
Todd ain't making that happen. Todd doesn't have the funding to make that happen.
Stoned is taking you 5 miles off the trail. It's not taking you 105 miles off the trail.
Oh God, I only brought enough mushrooms for like 2 days. All right, tell me about the Skookum cast.
Before we get into it, I gotta have a little bathroom break.
All right, sounds good.
When you look at the casting of it,
All right, and we're back. All right, Skookum cast.
I don't really know how to explain this one. I know what it is, and if you Google Skookum cast, it will.
So like a cast, as in like a plaster cast of like a bone or like a.
Yeah. So basically, what this was, it was a Bigfoot show had set up basically like a trap, and I believe for some reason Bigfoot really like fruit pastries. And when I say fruit pastries, I mean like the normal bait that they use would be like an apple pie or like a tart or something like that to bring
Like that
them
you would
in.
put on like Mima's windowsill,
Yes.
and then someone would come by and steal it.
So
They thought Bigfoot was like a 1920s bandit that was stealing
they thought that Bigfoot was Foghorn Leghorn stealing a pie off of Grandma's
smell
windows.
traveling out to him, and then he floated over to it.
So the Skookum cast, they had set up in a kind of like a mud bog area to where any footprints that would lead in to take it would then be captured in the mud and give a better print. What they did,
Classic Bigfoot trap.
yeah, no more. Is there an accurate term than classic Bigfoot trap is an apple pie sitting in a mud bog?
Exactly.
So
You could have just told me that. You could say this is a classic Bigfoot trap scenario. It'd been like apple pie and a mud bog. You're like, you got it.
is it apples leaning underneath a crate that you can then pull and
Yeah.
close on top of it? No, it's the mud bog. But as this Sasquatch was making it through the mud bog to get to I think it was an apple pie, it slipped and it fell.
It's slippery, man. It's mud bog.
And there's a print in the mud that they took this casting off of a Sasquatch forearm, a hip, a thigh, and the ass that came out of the plaster. And this happened in 2000. So this wasn't like a 70s or 80s thing. We'd already had Patterson Gimlin. This was like the first.
So this happened when they weren't there, obviously.
I think it was while they were shooting, though. Which, again, this is where I don't want to try to tip that this would be a fake.
I'm going to tell you right now. I feel like you're playing fair and you're shooting this thing straight because this doesn't sound like good evidence.
No,
and the fact that you're sharing it proves that you're trying to.
It's not. But, and this is where I gotta say is our guy, that Idaho State professor, Dr. Meldrum, when he went ahead and looked at the casting of it, and Grover was still alive for this, or at this point, I think he was 2002 is when he passed, so we had 2 years or some to study. Krantz went ahead and said that he thought that this was a fairly accurate, that it could potentially be this. Meldrum found our old friend, the dermal ridge on where the legs and feet and like around the bottom half of the casting, like where the feet would be. He found dermal ridges inside of the cast that were very similar to the dermal ridges found on great apes in Africa. So not dermal ridges as far as, and this, again, I have to lend that I have to have so much belief in Dr. Meldrum that he wouldn't lie about this.
So it was off the heel.
Yeah, off of the heel. So the dermal ridges that were found by Meldrum, he said were most closely related to a great ape in Africa, which again is a cousin to the human being and potentially the Gigantopithecus. It all doesn't make any sense until you hear about the dermal ridges to me.
Did you read the conspiracy that all Bigfoot sightings, or like legitimate, what would be considered legitimate Bigfoot sightings, are actually like gorillas and monkeys that escape out of like private collections?
In
That
Florida,
makes you think about something for a minute. Like, if you really think about that, if anything has shown us over the last like few years of TV, is that you can keep fucking anything in captivity. Like, if people are keeping tigers like fucking Joe Exotic, you know that there's like a black market like Gorilla King or some shit that's like keeping like an illegal monkey farm in like the Colorados. the Rockies or some shit.
There was something that I listened to that said there were sightings of skunk apes that they did chalk up to orangutans or other
The red-haired kind of
yes,
apes.
that had escaped and that were still living down in kind of the climate in Florida, because it
Like
is
the Everglades and shit.
it is sort of similar to where their natural home climate would
The
be.
fucking like pythons that come from shit. That's why they can breed so fucking much, is because the climate's almost exactly.
And of course, Florida would be the place where this happens.
Yes.
Because Florida is a place where everything happens. There's nothing that's not possible in Florida. It's not just Disney World.
Hear me out.
Anything can happen in Florida.
Hear me out.
Nothing good, but anything else.
There's a truckload of gorillas being transported, being brought in from like Seattle.
Yeah.
And it's being brought into the port of Seattle illegally, I might add you. That thing all of a sudden on a semi truck going through the Pacific Northwest tips over, releases all the gorillas into the woods, and all of a sudden now we're looking at generations of gorillas, and they've just adapted.
I want it. I want that to happen. As bad as it sounds and as invasive as I feel like gorillas would be, and it would mean that we'd have to kill more of them to try to keep their populations down like we do with wolves now, having gorillas that close would be sweet.
Yeah.
And this goes back to something that I think we've talked about a couple times on here. There's nothing that makes me as sad for animals as a zoo, but there's also something as a human being that makes me want to go to a zoo so bad. Because, and this
It's
is
like
where
two parts of your brain fighting.
yeah, this is where something where like when I go and see the bears at the zoo, like whenever we go travel somewhere, we always make sure to hit the zoo, which I don't like because I'm in disagreement with why it's there. But because it's there, I have to be able to swallow that sadness, because when is the next time that I'm going to be able to go see a bear that up close? Or when is the next time that I'm going to be able to see a crocodile?
Yeah.
The only way I'm comfortable seeing a crocodile is if there's a very large piece of glass between us. I still want to see it.
Yeah, I don't like the concept that like so like when you have a kid, I wouldn't go to a zoo as an adult.
Oh God, I thought you were about to say an orphanage.
No. As an adult, like I don't give a shit about going to the zoo. I think the last time I went was when I was like in my mid-20s, because I hadn't been in so long. And like I was going with someone just as, I don't know if it was a date or something like that. It's fucking depressing as shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially seeing the animals that aren't in like a natural climate or anything like that, and seeing how much space relative to like, if they can tell you how much space is in like your home, and you've had a home at that point, they're like, you live in 1,200 square feet, and they're like, this enclosure is over 700 square feet, and you're looking at it and you're just like, how would I feel living in that like my entire life? But then like having a kid, it's something to do to like, because that's the closest for a while that you'll be able to show like this weird wildlife world that they've never seen before. And so you have to like swallow that sadness and act happy to be there and be like, oh yeah, these animals love it here. They got it so good. Daddy, why does that warthog look so sad? Like, no, he's probably just tired from all the love he gets.
Yeah, I have to blame maybe some of it on just being stoned, because I've had experiences. I told you about the transcendental experience I had with the gorilla at the zoo in, I think it was Portland, but I realized that he was sitting up by the glass because they always put heat pads underneath the ground in front of the glass to try to draw the animals in to be able to see. And he was sitting against that glass, and he looked into my eyes, and I looked into his, and I saw more human in him than I see in some actual human beings. And I knew at that point that him and I had connected, and he knew me.
You knew
and I
that
knew
there
him.
at some point would have to be something maybe between you guys.
Yeah.
As far as like some type of evolutionary leap that might still exist.
I am devolved enough that he looked at me and he saw that in me, and he's evolved enough that he looked in me and he saw him, and we just went back and forth. But I feel like there's just something to it, and there's just something to kind of, would you ever want to go see, like, if we establish that Bigfoot was real,
Okay.
and they put one in a zoo, how fast would you be at that zoo?
I don't think as a society it could ever get to that point.
You don't think so?
Nope. It would take so many years that I wouldn't be alive to where that would be something commercialized to see it in like a zoo.
Okay. Which brings me to the next question.
Unless it was found in like secret, and someone was like, a backwoods guy's like, I'm charging money to do this. Y'all want to see a Bigfoot?
like Bigfoot just
And
lives
then
in the
that
barn
wouldn't
and
last
he
long
gives-
because the government would, yeah.
yeah.
You have to be in there quick to be able to see that Bigfoot. I see something on the side of the road. The guy's got good showmanship. Bigfoot in a cage right now. And if he has something that can draw my attention like that, I might have to think twice about stopping.
This kind of brings me back to Grover, and this is something that Grover and I sort of diverge on until I really looked into why he said it.
Didn't Grover want to just kill one?
Grover carried around a gun, and since Grover carried around a gun, he was going to shoot it. Now, he said that he wanted to shoot it, which I'm against shooting Bigfoot. I'm fully more than comfortable enough in myself and in my own brain, which is shocking because there's not a lot of stuff that I'm this comfortable with. If I saw a Bigfoot in the wild and
Are you going to give me I would shoot that Bigfoot, just be able to prove that the Bigfoot exists?
I wouldn't do it.
Okay,
I wouldn't shoot him. I would be more comfortable living with myself knowing that I saw him.
Okay.
And every time I told him that story that they thought that I was crazy, I would take that over not shooting a
Okay.
Bigfoot. But him saying that, I thought, well, he's a scientist. Like he has to show evidence.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only way that this works for him. This is his end game. Is he wants to prove that this happens. When he was asked about why he would shoot a Bigfoot,
I'm just trying to imagine what it would be like if we were like driving up like through the Pacific Northwest, and somehow me and you were the only two, and we just sat there and just watched them. Like, how would I don't think you could drive after that.
nah.
You literally have to just they'd find you 3 days later sitting on the side of the road being like, what happened? Be like, I'm still not able to wrap my head around this.
Turns out that every guy that's missing more teeth than I can count was right. Mm-hmm. Turns out
They all knew.
Brad and Chad that were out in the woods making meth that saw the Sasquatch, they weren't wrong.
God damn it, Todd was right.
Yeah, dude, Todd of all people, Todd was right. But in saying that, he also, after he said it, he was questioned about it because he got a lot of hate mail for saying that he would shoot it. And he was asked in an interview one time what the second thing would be that he would do after he shot Bigfoot. And he just said reload. Because he knew that if he ever got that close enough to Bigfoot, that it wasn't going to be either him, or it wasn't going to be a situation where they both probably walk away okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it was either going to be him or the Bigfoot at that
Or
point.
there are going to be multiple Bigfoot with
so,
it.
So the protection level...
Bigfoot never travel alone. You always reload immediately.
It wasn't that he had the bloodlust to want to shoot a Bigfoot. He just knew that if he ever got close enough to see one, it was either going to be him or the Bigfoot. So he wanted to have the gun on his side because the Bigfoot had immense talents. That
I respect that.
Yeah, and I'm cool with
So
that.
he has it there to protect himself, but at the same time, I mean, did he have a range?
Didn't say a range.
He didn't say a range, so he's like,
didn't say a range.
Bigfoot's like 200 yards, doesn't see him, has his back to me. He's like, this Bigfoot's a danger to me. this guy knows I'm here.
It's gonna be like when you hear an autopsy of a police shooting, and they're like, "You shot only in the back." It's like, whoa, that guy was a threat. Wait a second.
I couldn't tell. It was so furry. I couldn't tell if he was facing me or if he was facing the other
I
way.
thought he had a gun.
He was holding the rock. It looked like a gun. Oh, God. All right, so are we on?
The piece de resistance, the coup de grace, the one that goes back and forth so much. And besides, like I was telling you about my confusion between the Patterson-Gimli and the Zapruder film.
Yeah.
And you so astutely pointed it out that one of them blows your mind and the other one is literally the mind being blown.
Yeah.
It's got to be, I would assume, the most popular piece of evidence and information that anybody that's trying to get somebody else to believe in Bigfoot would use. Like, if this was your first introduction to Bigfoot, was seeing the Patterson-Gimlin film, I don't know how
If
you
it's
can
a
say
pyramid,
no.
that's the top.
Yep.
Because if there's so many things that spawn out of that if someone even sees like any logo for anything that has to do with like Bigfoot or Sasquatch, for the most part that has Bigfoot or Sasquatch, is doing the iconic pose where it's one arm swinging kind of behind the other and slightly turned to where you're getting that silhouette. Like the silhouette may change, but it's always almost that pose to where you
Yeah.
can actually see those arms swinging. Like this is it. This is what spawned basically really all of like the major interest or almost a renewed interest after this kind of like went into like legend or myth.
And being that, it clearly had the biggest target on its back. This, for as much as people that were Bigfoot enthusiasts wanted to raise this to the highest levels, all the people that wanted Bigfoot not to be real went to every effort to try to discredit
Oh
it.
yeah.
And that's where this becomes like it's kind of a watershed moment. And I have to say, for as much as I wanted to disregard it, there's a certain level of like my crime brain that hears things about people trying to discredit it, and it immediately is like, well, you trying to discredit this doesn't make any sense. Because one of the things that they use to try to discredit the Patterson Gimlin, which we'll talk about it real quick. So it's 59 seconds of film that was shot during an encounter, which Roger Patterson and unnamed Bob Gimlin. Yeah, Bob Gimlin. They went on a horseback. They were in Northern California, and they were along Bluff Creek. They were riding up. The sequence starts as Roger Patterson is riding ahead of Gimlin on his horse. The horse becomes disturbed. They look over at what the disturbance was of the horse, and the disturbance was a Bigfoot that was, I believe it was at the creek, maybe getting a drink.
Yeah, so they like came around like a bend in the river, I guess, and at that point, because these guys are going up there to try to get
The sole reason that Patterson and Gimlin are in the forest that day is to see Bigfoot.
But they're not just here, like they're not just like, hey, you know what we should do today? Let's just go up and ride up in the hills and see if we can get Bigfoot. They had been tracking like rumors and all this stuff, so they had been doing this for a while. So that's not to say that like, hey, they didn't just finally get lucky. They're actually trying to do this, so they're prepared. So they come like to a bend in the river. The trail is kind of following the river, and they said there was an uprooted tree and the like had fallen over, and then like the tree roots was like as high as like a first floor of a house. And then as they kept riding just a little bit, they saw something kind of crouched, and as soon as like they saw it, it kind of saw them and it kind of raised up, and then it started moving.
Yep.
And of course at this point they're not like, it's not like a camera where you're like live streaming or like a GoPro where it's just constant. They have a camera that they have to then get off of the horse and get set up and everything. Now, I'm not saying this to discredit it. What I'm saying is this is why there's only 60 seconds and the Bigfoot is in it for like a limited amount of time, and why it like shakes and everything like that is because they have to get a camera down to do this.
You see videos that are still pop up. You see fight videos that happen nowadays with the finest handheld cameras that we can find, and the fight video will still be shaky because the person watching it is so enamored in what's going on in front of them that they can't keep steady hands. And for as much as I want to blame Patterson for as bad as the film is and as shaky as it is, I can't. Because I would drop a load in my pants and nut at the exact same time as soon as I saw a Bigfoot. I'm not thinking about holding that camera steady. I'm trying to figure out what in the fuck.
Well, they have to get
seeing.
off their horses.
Yeah.
First. And so then they're like from a distance, because it's moving as soon as it sees them. Again, we're just recounting what happened.
Yep. I trying to be impartial, I just cannot.
So one of them ends up trying to kind of like get off the horse and everything. Another of them rides across the creek. They're still like, at one point, one of them gets like 25 feet or something like that from it was the closest, but it's not the camera. By the time they get the camera set up and in position, it's at 80 feet from them, and it's kind of walking across like the sandbar. And that's where you're going to, if you ever get like the image of the black and white, and then sometimes it's colorized when it's looking back, and it's mostly black, and it's got like some silver and everything. And here's the thing. When you watch it, because if you've never seen this before or anything, go watch it and you're going to look at it and be like, that's obviously a person in a suit. That's going to be where your mind takes you, and I completely understand why it does. Here's why.
It has to, though.
I know.
It has to take you there because the belief that the existence of Bigfoot has to bring you back to something
Something
that you
looks
know.
that human but isn't human.
Yep.
I actually think there's part of you that doesn't want to accept that may be a possibility.
Your mind tricks yourself.
Yeah. And also, how many things have we seen that were just in a movie where it was someone playing someone in a costume? And so you're like, if I don't recognize that as human, it's obviously a human in a costume.
It's your frame of reference.
Yes. So here's the evidence for it when you actually just break that down. At the time when this occurred, like back in 67, and there's been like a lot of research that's been done into this. Most of the research is pro, so there's not a lot of counter arguments because most time nowadays people won't go to try to disprove it. It's just not worth doing anything.
Yeah, and that's really what it comes down to is it's not worth disproving
Yes.
the Patterson-Gimlin film.
So when they have done like History Channel documentaries and stuff like that into this, they went to people that were aware of like what Hollywood costumes, because it would have to, it's 67. You can't just go buy something like this. You'd have to get it from like a Hollywood costume place. And they've talked about how there wasn't anything in those days that could mimic the type of movement that it shows within the camera, because when you're looking at it, you can actually see like the musculature and everything of the different movements and how they actually flex when it's moving and when it like turns its back. So it would have to almost be a full fur, super skin tight to where it was like, but the fur almost looks longer. Like it's super hard to describe like when you're looking at it. But nowadays it's like that costume would be so easy to fake. But
Yes.
this is back when you couldn't fake it with the costume.
No, we have CGI now to see, not all of Momoa, because Momoa is a hunk and he's got a tremendous body of himself, but there are CGI parts of it to where you see muscles flex that you would be able to see normally, but underneath a suit.
Yeah.
And for that to be able to happen back in the 60s, it wasn't possible. And not to mention the Bigfoot that was filmed, Patty, I'm assuming, was probably a play on Patterson because he was the one that found it. He got to name it.
They determined it was female because of its large
Breastises.
its breasts.
Yeah, it's. I believe the way that Krantz described it was the heaping. Fuck, I can't remember what it was.
Heaping breasts?
It was heaping, but then there was like bulbous. Oh, heaping pendulum style, like bulbous breasts. So
Very descriptive.
Yeah, he went into a lot of detail for Bigfoot titties, which, if you are making a suit, what's the easiest suit to make? Something to where you don't have to fashion breasts on top of a suit. So why would you not go, if you're making a suit, why would you not make it a man?
Yeah.
You don't have to put a fucking dick on the front of it because you can play the hair card on it.
Yeah.
Just make it a normal chest that you would see in, I don't know when Planet of the Apes came out, but I'm assuming it was probably right around then. I think one of the guys that they questioned did make the suits for Planet of the Apes.
Yeah, he did, and that's why
He
he
said
was
it
able to
wasn't one of
reference.
his,
And he's
though.
like, this is what I do. Like, I would make it out of this if I could to make it look more real. Because
Yeah.
the ones you look at Planet of the Apes are obviously, very obviously, like people in suits. So he's like, if the technology to do that would have been available, I would have done that for the movie.
One of the other ways that they tried to discredit it was through confession. Patterson died of cancer a decent while ago. I know the year, but it escapes me. He took it to his deathbed. He said that it was real. There were 3 men that confessed to being in the Patty suit that day. And
Heretics.
from sports, as we know, when a coach comes out and he says the word, I have 2 number 1 quarterbacks, that's code speak for he really doesn't have a number 1 quarterback. So 3 men admitting to being in the suit, to me, in my own mind, with thinking about like court and all that kind of stuff, if you have 3 people that confess to the crime, there's a good chance that those 3 people weren't a party to the crime. They were just false confessions. That you
I don't
got
get that
from-
rationale, but I'm going to respect it.
Well, I mean, if you were to say, hey, there was 1 guy in a suit, but then 3 people own up to it, you know that 2 of them are lying
That's true.
because there can only be 1 man in the suit at the time. So if you have 3 guys say that it was you, is that more of a logical leap to say that all 3 of them, like one of them could be it, or that all 3 of them could be lying for credit, fame,
I
whatever?
think they're
you
all
want?
liars.
Yeah, you would think that they were all liars. Because it's just as likely that each of them has lied about it as each of them is telling the truth. Which, I get that that's a real philosophical thing, but that's the way that I have to try to discredit that kind of information. And full disclosure, Patterson Gimlin film, I 100% believe was fake. I don't think it was real. I don't think it was real Bigfoot. As much as I want to believe Bigfoot, I have to tell myself that it's fake, because if that was real, then that means that all the doubt that I put into this is just wasted time.
Oh, all the time doubting this.
Yes. Yeah.
You wasted half your time
Yep.
not going full bore into Bigfoot.
Yeah. And the proof would be in the pudding right there in front of my eyes. Everything that I've ever asked for as far as real documented evidence could be the Patterson Gimlin film, but I have to believe that it's fake, because there's so many
real.
other times that I've had to believe that it was fake.
It's not real. To be, like I said, I think that if anybody gets a good look at Bigfoot, they do not have a camera capable of capturing before it would run off or anything like that. And I think at this point, if they did exist for a while and they're not like in, current times and everything, if they died out even, a few hundred years ago and everything, I still think that there could be something, even like mountain tribes that kind of devolved into basically looking like mountain people, never bathing, having like black hands and everything like that. I think that that could be a possibility, and that could be, I think that's maybe even like a kind of a halfway point between Bigfoot and people. That's kind of a happy medium.
And I don't know if it just never really occurred to me to be something that I would ever really want to study as far as like interests in college or anything like that. And I'm not going to credit Bigfoot for the reason why I think that this would work. But I try to portray a fairly normal human being that kind of has radical-ish beliefs in some ways. But I want to be somebody to where be like, that's a Bigfoot guy. Like, I don't want that. I don't want to be like, that's a guy that believes in it. But every once in a while, there will be a story that comes across of like a Bigfoot sighting, a Bigfoot finding, where if I catch wind of it, I'll watch the YouTube video. I'll try to pick it apart, but there's certain things.
Do you get fed any type of Bigfoot stuff in your feeds?
Not no.
Okay.
I'm gonna say no while my head shakes yes. Like, it's sort of that kind of a deal. But there will be things where there will be like a Bigfoot that's caught, and there will be a YouTube video of it, or there will be a million articles that are on these sites where you just know that it's not a credible source. I'll look at it. One thing, I don't know if you had ever seen it or come across it in this research, but there was something called Kennewick Man. And Kennewick Man was a Cro-Magnon man that was found near Kennewick, Washington, like Tri-Cities area, and it was frozen. And to see the pictures of Kennewick Man and to kind of look at it, it's sort of like another link. And I had heard about it as a kid. We had been to Kennewick, and I think it was at like a museum or something like that. I have no idea why in the fuck we would have gone to Kennewick, Washington. It must have been family or something like that, but it was in a museum, and I remember being fascinated with it while I was young. And Grover Krantz was actually brought in to talk about it, more of the anthropologist, as far as like not the Sasquatch side of him, but just the anthropology of it. And it is like a caveman. Or did you pull it up and see the picture of him?
Yeah.
Like, it's a caveman. It's a frozen caveman that they came across. There was Kennewick Man, and I think there was like a sidekick.
It's a ruggedly handsome frozen caveman.
Yeah.
He looks like he looks like he's seen some shit.
And there was sort of like an undiscovered finding of Kennewick Man that we had up until he was found and discovered. We had no idea that Cro-Magnon kind of...
Yeah, it was the shaping of the skull or something like that. Yeah.
Didn't know that existed. And it was found in the Northwest. It was found in Washington, in the Pacific Northwest. So to say that we found something like that was something that was previously undiscovered that we didn't know, it's kind of tough to make an assumption besides the stuff that points against it, the not having skeletal remains, not having it in fossil history. There's a million different things to point at and say that we don't have any reference to why this would be real, but we also didn't have any reference to thinking that Kennewick Man would be real until we found him.
You're going to be very excited when we go on our trip in June.
Yeah.
Because they are very into Bigfoot up there.
Pretty about it?
Yeah.
All right, good.
Yeah.
I'm excited for that. But that kind of leads into the wind down and something that I kind of wanted to ask you because I have a certain feeling, and I think we sort of listened to something that sort of perfectly summed up why I want Bigfoot to be real, and like what's your take? Like, what leads you to have? Because you said you don't think that it exists, but you also are still open to the possibility that it either could have existed
Yeah, like
or
if they come out and they're like Bigfoot's real, I'm not going to say like I knew it, but I'll like think about it and be like, well, I mean, yeah, I guess that's possible.
is it the science that leads you there, or is it like what?
I think it's more so, I don't know how to say it without like sounding okay. For me, like I always feel like there's a lot of people and everything. So like the fact that like something could have stayed isolated and existed like untouched by all the bullshit and everything like that. Not that that sounds like an appealing life is living out there in the fucking like sticks and all that kind of shit and living like a goddamn Sasquatch is appealing. But like it almost says to me like those are kind of the last things are like, oh, this is still kind of like a wild place. Like there are wild places in the world, but like so much stuff like in Africa you think about stuff and like, well, this is a game park or this is a hunting preserve. I know there's that's fractional compared to how much.
Yeah.
But like you would think like there's still something like we don't know about our planet. But then once we discovered it, then we just fucking kill it or fucking destroy it or do something like that. So I would rather be it exist and me never know about it.
Something that is impossible to be bastardized.
Unless I could be the only one to know about it. And I could then
That
choose
it's
to share that
special to
information
you.
with other people.
Yeah.
Would I be able to handle that pressure?
I think you would.
Imagine knowing without a shadow of a doubt, never having a doubt that that's real and you are the gatekeeper for that information.
Would you spend your life trying to convince everybody else, or would you just be comfortable in knowing?
You only have to convince one person, man. Because if you knew about it, then you would know where they are and all that kind of stuff. Only person you got to convince is the richest person that you could get in contact with. Can you imagine that? Being like, I got a secret.
Maybe
How much
that's-
money that would be worth today? Could you handle the pressure?
Maybe that's what Peter Byrne did to that Texas oil tycoon about the Yeti hand, when he's like, I'm the only one besides these monks that has this information.
What if Jimmy Carter did it? Or not Jimmy Carter. What if Jimmy Stewart did it?
It would
Jimmy's
be
like,
shocking if Jimmy Carter
Jimmy's
did
like,
it.
I can't have this Sasquatch blood on my hand or this Yeti blood on my hand if this thing is real. And then they have to go after him. He's like, he pops open the plane doors, they're flying in and everything, and just tosses the finger out. Then he calls his guy and he's like, I need a finger.
We gotta frame this up right. We gotta double cross these double crossers. I mean, I definitely see that as like
What's your like kind of same thing for you? Like what would be your reason that like what's your rationale for it being real? Like what does that mean if it was real? What would that mean for you?
mine sounds just a little bit more depressing, but I don't. I'll preface this by saying, as far as like cryptids and shit go, Mothman and different things like that, I really have no time for. Like it doesn't really tickle me or anything like that. But Lake Champlain monster, Loch Ness, there's videos that I tend to get and look at, and there's still a few to this day where like I still will watch them when I'm high and kind of try to break them down.
So do you believe in those? Like out of those, are those more believable to you because those are very isolated incidents about those things than Bigfoot? Because you could believe of maybe like an isolated incident happening, or
It is, but it's also like a certain, and kind of the depressing part is we know so much about life. Like we know about the monotony of like a normal day of a 9 to 5 of going to work, of taking your kids to soccer practice and all that kind of stuff, that you get caught up in the daily grind of being a person that just has their own life, and that's what you know and that's what you stick to. Bigfoot for me is like this whole other world outside of what you would do on a daily basis. Like if you're going to go camping, you go camping for pleasure to try to get away from what goes on inside of a city or anything like that. if you believe in Bigfoot and he could be real, and you go out on the weekends to spend your time in the woods to go look for something that your mind is telling you just can't be real. Like, it's like a unicorn. I don't know what the fuck happened with unicorns. I don't know how they came to be. I don't know if they were real. But the thought that there could be a unicorn is
A human unicorn?
and that's really what it is. It's the desire to want something that seems so magical and so not possible to be real.
What if this is what happens? What if anyone who finds like Bigfoot, the tribe, like obviously if they find Bigfoot, they're trying to go find Bigfoot.
Uh-huh.
And if the Bigfoot tribe finds him, they're like, "Come on, brother. Like you seeked us out.
Yeah.
You obviously want to be with us." And that's why you never just hear them being exposed. Maybe these guys just disappear, and whenever they disappear, it's not a bear mauling, or it's not that they got like hypothermia or a tree fell on them or anything. No, it's that they found Bigfoot and Bigfoot welcomed them into their Bigfoot community, and they had a Bigfoot wife.
I fucking hope so. I hope that that's all real, because that impossibility. Could you? And maybe it's just because it's something that I can't imagine doing. But like, if you threw yourself 100% completely into Loch Ness and you were around the loch every day and you were out there taking pictures and you were on the boat, you wouldn't have like a valuable or tangible life goal that you could like live on.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just something that drives you as far as a life passion more than being able to make money to make a house payment or do anything like that.
Like
Like,
crazy comes in, where that crazy gets just a little bit too big to be controlled full time, because we all got a little crazy in us. You just have that. It's not in a big enough amount. When it's too big, the crazy starts taking over the rational part, and they're like, "Yeah, this will be my life now."
how great would that be to be able to live in that crazy? Because that crazy is not a 9 to 5.
You got to be able to turn that off.
That crazy is getting a cell phone call from some weirdo down the street that said that he saw something, and you go grab your camera and you grab everything that you can and you load up in the ATV that you somehow can afford not having a job.
It would be nice, but you can't turn that crazy off.
No, you can't. But
if you were able to, perfect. That would be great. You get off of work Friday, put the kid down, or it gets a certain time of night. You turn that switch, you let yourself go crazy for a little bit, and then you pop that off before you wake up the next day.
I think about not having to turn that switch off, though, to be able to live in that. And then to know that that could be real.
I've seen those people. I've watched a lot of documentaries with those people, a lot of them very recently.
I want them to be right. And that's why I want Bigfoot to be real, is because I want to know that there's still something out there that still is something that you can't wrap your mind around.
Yeah. It's that, Earth, the old girl, she still has some mysteries.
Yeah. But it's the undiscovered tribe that you hear about down in the Amazon that no idea existed, that nobody knew existed. And then you find it and it's like, holy shit, there's still mystery.
And here's the deal. If you're still listening right now, fantastic. You made it. Also, you probably have an interest in Bigfoot. Maybe you have a Bigfoot story. We would love to hear it.
Yeah.
Send it to us on our socials that we put in earlier. And maybe during like a follow-up episode, we can go ahead and elaborate on that story and maybe get some information, maybe on like a update on Bigfoot or something like that.
Yeah, eventually that's one of the goals of this podcast, is for us to have a little YouTube series of us going to find Bigfoot and to be able to podcast about that trip and to go spend some time with some of these folks that live in that.
Not just exclusively that. We're not turning into like Bigfoot people. No. That's a segment planned.
Yeah, this is for funsies.
Yeah, that funsies. All right, guys. Well, thanks again for listening to this one. You got anything else?
No, he might be out there. Maybe next time you're in the forest, keep an extra eye out for Bigfoot.
Oh, take apples too.
Yeah, always remember to take apples.
Put them in a perimeter around your camp, and if they're gone, it's Bigfoot. Oh, we got to put them up high enough in the tree to where like deer can't get to them. But if they're gone, 100% you have that. Hey, that's Sasquatch.
Everybody that lives in the crazy brings extra apples into the woods.
Right. All right, later, guys.
Peace.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us for another episode. If you like what you heard, hit that subscribe and like button. Follow us. If you didn't like what you heard, still hit that anyway, because we'll probably cover something in the future that you do like. Please follow us on our social media. Adam, hit them with it.
Our Instagram is Historically High Pod, Historically High POD, and we are on Twitter at Historically High. That's Historically HI.
All right. And if you guys want to send in any feedback, suggestions, hit us up on those two, or you can even do it on Gmail. It's historicallyhighpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks again.
Peace.